안녕하세요. Louder. All the friends from all around the world. More than 35 countries. 35개국 이상에서 와주셨습니다. 40개 BP, 40 BPs. Welcome. It's Friday morning. Man, I can't really believe it's been only 3 weeks out and we are all here. 준비한 지 3주밖에 안 되는 전 세계 모든 EOS 커뮤니티에서 와주셨습니다. 블록체인이 아니었으면 절대 불가능했을 일이죠. 일단 before we begin, I'd like to give a brief announcement about real-time interpretation. So there's a Korean English and Chinese English and then Chinese Korean. So 3 sets of languages. So channel 1 is Korean, channel 2 English, and channel 3 Chinese. So 3 weeks out. So this event has been impossible because we began from nothing. We began from nothing, but without those 3 contributors, we cannot pull this event. It's actually how we can hold this event in this venue. This is very luxury venue, but then we can only do this because we shared this venue with other partners, but then at the same time, those 3 big contributors. EOS Nation, we see Eves. Please stand up. Thank you so much. From Canada. And then EOS Authority from UK, Rohan. And then Crypto Alliance, Roman from Ukraine. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then also there's so many contributors who add a lot of value. EOS Canada, Richard, Matthew, and Josh. EOS Canon, Ricky. Hey, Bean, Franco. Our Chinese friends from Shanghai. 谢谢. And EOS Rio? EOS Rio's not here? Igor? Sleeping. Partying hard yesterday. 어제 와가지고 어제 도착하신 분들이 많습니다. 파티를 너무 열심히 하느라 아직 못 오신 것 같습니다. Paytomat, 수딥, 유리 밖에 계신 것 같네요. 알겠습니다. EOS Endpool? 오케이. 맨 마지막에 最后的一家 그리고 Uncloak, 그 다음에 Oracle Chain, EOS, EOS Pay, EOS Whole, EOS 모두 너무 감사드립니다. 사실 이 행사는 this event, all the 40 BPs we gathered for the first time yesterday, and then we're having this public conference, and then we're gonna have unconference tomorrow. 그래서 오늘은 EOS가 어떤 건지 행사는 소개해드리는 자리고요. 그리고 내일은 EOS BP들이 모여서 앞으로 EOS를 어떻게 운영해 갈 것인지 소개를 내부적으로 협의를 많이 하려고 하고 있습니다. 오늘 진행은요. Today's program is made up. Sorry we didn't put this into slides, but then we have just to give you a brief introduction about the program. So before noon, we're gonna talk about governance. So we have Thomas Cox here, and then we have in the afternoon we're gonna talk about community. 한국과 중국과 영미권에 있는 커뮤니티가 EOS 커뮤니티 EOS 토큰 홀더들이 도대체 어떤 것들을 원하는지, 그리고 이어서는 dapps 생태계에 대해서 또 이야기를 나눌 것입니다. 그래서 킬러 뎁이 어떤 거 있는지 오후 시간에 또 다룰 예정이고요. 오전에 킬러 뎁 세션을 하고 오후에는 커뮤니티하고 그 램, 그다음에 그런 기술적인 부분들을 다룰 예정입니다. 그래서 지금 EOS 커뮤니티에서 굉장히 많은 공을 세워주고 계신 분이죠. Thomas Cox, one of the thought leader in the EOS community, he has some good words for this event. So please welcome Thomas Cox.
15 days ago, that's 35 days, the EOS mainnet went live. And that was quite a day. Several weeks before that, the code had launched, been made available. And about a year and a half prior to that, 3 people whom we know as Brock, Dan, and Brendan got together and created a company called Block One to try to create the software we now know as EOS. But that was not the beginning. They stood on the shoulders of the creations of Ethereum, which stood on the shoulders of the creations of Bitcoin about 10 years ago. Who knew that 10 years ago that little experiment would challenge the balance of power between sovereign states and sovereign individuals? But even that was not the beginning, because before that, there were efforts at creating digital gold, digital cash. Efforts that all failed, that were all crushed by centralized government. But the results of those experiments set the foundation for Bitcoin and Ethereum and EOS, and then whatever is going to be next. But even digital cash was not the beginning. Also, about 20 years ago, recording contracts were invented by several people, including Ian Grigg, who is one of the advisors to the EOS project. We have come a very long way in a very short time. 35 days ago, we went live. Nobody here knew if they'd be a paid block producer. Everybody hoped. Everybody wondered. What do the whales want? What do the voters want? Will we ever get to 15%? It was only 21 days ago that Santosh and Hans said, hey, let's put on a conference in Seoul. We are here in this moment in Seoul, South Korea, in the company of fellow true believers in the EOS software, facing an unknown future. In some ways, our ecosystem was launched prematurely. We don't have a referendum contract yet. The worker proposal system is still on the drawing board. A core feature, arbitration, is still struggling to find its footing. And those are just the problems we know about. What about the ones that are going to come to light tomorrow and next week? We are here in part because of our faith. Some of us, it was faith in Dan Larimer. For others, it was faith in Bitcoin and blockchain. I want to take this all the way back to the very beginning. When the first people decided that they were not going to be subject to arbitrary centralized power and that they would struggle against that, that is the root of the movement that we are engaged in today. And we may think we're technologists or marketing people. We're actually revolutionaries. And we don't know what the future holds. We can only guess. We hope it'll be greater decentralization, practical decentralization, not 3 mining pools, but true devolution of power from the center to the periphery, from the great institutions to the individual, and to decentralized collectives that we create ourselves voluntarily. But there's one lesson, it's not a software lesson, that I've learned over the past year. And it has very little to do with software. It has very little to do with blockchain. It has to do with what people can do when they share a vision and they're willing to trust each other a little bit, trust but verify, and holding on to a vision of the future, work hard at it. We were a few days before the launch, and we had no voting portal. and a collection of you, and you know who you are, banded together, not along block producer lines, but as fellow revolutionaries to create a voting portal, and it's an amazing voting portal. And we've seen that again and again, the EOS 911 response to theft. Imperfect as it's been, we have not stopped every theft, nor will we, but we have shown that when we trust each other and we verify each other and we collaborate effectively on a shared vision, there is nothing ultimately we can't do. And for that, I credit you. Give yourselves a round of applause. So congratulations, you are here at Seoul, 35 days after mainnet launch, facing a glorious and completely unknown future. I predict that the price of EOS will fluctuate. I predict that the next challenge will surprise us, and I predict we'll rise to the challenge. Thank you very much.
Good morning everyone. Slides. I am Rohan from EOS Authority. We are a block producer based in London. And thank you to the sponsors. The venue is amazing. And I have a demo to show you today. And I have a bit to cover before I start the demo. So let's get straight in. So these are all features on EOS. There are lots of features on EOS. The speakers today and the panelists will be discussing a lot of these features today. I'd like to pick two features, 500 millisecond block interval and free transactions. So 500 millisecond block interval. First, what is a block? This is a representation of a block. You have transactions in a block, so you have things like your voting transaction, your transfers, airdrops, all kinds of things in a transaction. What is important about a block is the moment the block is produced by a block producer, it's immediately visible. All the transactions are visible at that point to everybody within the network. So that is the important point there. And what's unique about EOS is it generates these blocks in 500 milliseconds. So in 500 milliseconds, you have one block, then the next, and so on. So every 500 milliseconds, you get blocks, and your transactions wait for 500 milliseconds before it's on the chain. So why is 500 milliseconds block time important? It's low latency. So the moment you send your transactions in, you wait a maximum of 500 milliseconds. And this is pretty much the hard-coded upper limit. So you wouldn't be waiting longer than that. OK, so let's look at 500 millisecond block interval in a real-world example. So for example, if you were to click on the like button, and if you had the different blockchains on EOS, you would get a response in like 500 milliseconds. So your like is on the blockchain, it's visible everywhere. Ethereum, it's like 30-second block time, so you would keep waiting, and after 30 seconds, yeah, got it. Bitcoin, it's 9 minutes, 10 minutes, so block time like really, really long. You would keep waiting for quite a long time for something like that. So the second point that I'd like to discuss before the demo is free transactions on EOS. If you have an account on EOS, your transactions are free. Ethereum, your transaction fees vary. Like I've seen $2, $5 recently on pretty high. So that is for a single transaction. On Bitcoin, the transaction fees fluctuate. It was as high as $35 in January, and yeah, it keeps. And what is confusing is like you pay more fees for faster transactions. So you pay more fees to get your transactions included by the miners and so on. On EOS, the transactions are free. Two types of rate limits apply. There are CPU limits and network limits to prevent abuse of free transactions. So, two features, 500 milliseconds block time and free to use transactions. They're amazing features, so we wanted to use this. And yeah, so we were like, what can you build on the fastest blockchain ever? And we thought of Space Invaders on EOS. Has anybody here played Space Invaders on EOS, the game that we built? Oh, amazing. Quite a lot. Perfect. So you've seen the testnet version. We built that in May before the mainnet was live. And yeah, a lot of people played it. A lot of people watched the videos. It was amazing. Today, we want to show you a demo of Space Invaders on the actual EOS mainnet. It was hard to get on the Wi-Fi and everything today, but if things go well, this will be an amazing demo. So before I show you the demo, I just want to tell you what it is. So this is a real-time action game. It is on the blockchain. Every move, your left, right, all kinds of things on the blockchain. If you have an EOS account, it's free to play. You have free transactions and so on. We made several improvements from the testnet version. Firstly, we don't need any RAM at all. So the game itself, it's completely on the chain, but we don't store anything on the RAM. We used to do it on the testnet version because RAM was free for our testnet version. We have more ways to play. You can play it on EOS. You can play it on browser with Scatter. Thank you, Nathan. We also have, we had to write a new web push plugin, C++ plugin, which actually sits on one of our nodes. It detects a transaction in a block and sends it immediately to a web API. We'll be open sourcing that. That's a core of what's used there. We also now have top scores, so you can play against each other, see how you stand among all the other EOS accounts. So before I go into the demo, this is how the game will work. You can play on the command line on Scatter and all of that, and then your moves go on to the EOS chain. A block producer somewhere in the world would actually include your transaction into the EOS blockchain, and then it gets pushed out to the actual game. So yeah, so let's switch over to the demo and cross our fingers. Okay, so this is how you would do it. You would enter your account name, and it'll tell you how many moves you have. So this account, it's got 844 moves. What's amazing is you only have 10 EOS staked for CPU, and you have 1 EOS staked for bandwidth, and that's enough for like 844 moves on the blockchain, so amazing. Each move is like 295 microseconds of CPU and 96 bytes of bandwidth, so you get lots of moves if you have like 10,000 here. So, and you play, for this demo, let's play with Scatter, and yep. So you get to control with a mobile or with your keyboard. This is a keyboard version. Let's see if it works. Oh, it's perfect. It's working. So, let me go through the demo again. What's happening here? There's Roshan there. He's playing the game. He's doing well so far. So what's happening now is he presses the right button and a left button. The moment he presses the right button, it goes on to Scatter signs it, it sends it to the blockchain. Jedi is producing now, Liberty Block's producing the block now, so the transaction goes to Liberty Block somewhere in the world. They add it to the blockchain, then it gets pushed to the browser window here, and you see the game working. So this is all live, it's happening right now on the mainnet. Oh, amazing, I can't believe it's working. So, yeah. So Argentina EOS just produced the transactions, thank you. And yeah, you keep playing, and then eventually at some point you die, you make a mistake or something. Get the last alien, come on. There you go. So as EOS Authority producing now. So yes, perfect. So this is, the live demo went better than expected. So perfect. So let's switch back to the slide. So you should try this today. It's not live yet. We still have the testnet version. We'll have to go back and then make it live. But yeah, it's an amazing thing. You can actually play a lot. You can have lots of moves. You can have hundreds of thousands of moves a day. So perfect. So what can you build in the fastest blockchain ever? This is just using two of the features of EOS. You can actually mix and match a lot of the other features and create like something really, really cool and amazing. We'd love to see what you will build. And yeah, so I'm pretty much good on time. This is about 9-10 minutes of talk where Bitcoin would come back with a transaction, really. So, so excellent, guys. Thank you so much. You've been amazing. And yeah. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Any questions, any feedback, thoughts, please connect with us on Telegram, Twitter, and so on. So much. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I am Roman of Crypto Lions. Very happy to be here. First of all, huge shout out and thank you to Han and Santosh of Node 1 for pulling together the worldwide crypto community, the worldwide EOS community. We are very happy to be the sponsors of such a thing, one of the many sponsors of such a thing. And as a reward, I get to stand here hoping that I can say something that a room full of extraordinarily smart people will find meaningful or at least interesting, or at least not boring. So the most important thing for a block producer is to produce blocks and to handle all the associated communication. But I will talk about a thing that it seems like most of us are doing as an addition to producing blocks, and that is building projects and infrastructure with the goal of making EOS more useful and more valuable. Specifically, I'm going to talk about 3 projects or categories of projects that I'm personally very excited about. And I'm excited about them because to me they do not seem like pie in the sky idealism. They seem like they are right at our fingertips, just waiting to be built. 6 months to beta, if not less. And because these 3 projects all have the potential to reach outside the EOS ecosystem and touch the real world and influence it in a positive way. So, firstly, I think EOS can change the way that software is sold by popularizing tokenization. Over the course of my lifetime, software sales have evolved. Software used to come on a piece of plastic in a box. When, during my adolescence, I was gifted the incredible gift of the video game Doom 2, it came on a piece of plastic in a box. And then we saw one-time software downloads, and then we saw rightly called the SaaS revolution, led in part by companies like Salesforce, and that has become the norm. Software is something you subscribe to monthly, and that's, I think, a very deeply entrenched belief. But we're starting to see some entrepreneurs do tokenization, and there are trade-offs there. It's not all good news, there are trade-offs. The most obvious benefit of tokenization is depending on how you issue your token, you get your starting capital. Let's say you do an airdrop and keep 10% from yourself, that's your starting capital. The most obvious risk of tokenization seems to be exposure to the volatility of the crypto markets. And the biggest questions regarding tokenization is exactly how you build your economics. Inflation, deflation, is that enough to cover your operating expenses? But the project that I envision might look like this. It might be called Tokenize My SaaS, and it might be a very simple UI that guides a SaaS-minded businessman through the steps of issuing a token. It also creates for them widgets that will serve as a login portal, a registration portal, and it will make tokenization a drop-in replacement for SaaS. And I think that has the potential to open up a big floodgate into crypto and into EOS in particular. So that's one idea that I'm excited about. We're not working on it yet. Happy to see anyone else do it, with or without, correspondence. The next two ideas that I thought I would share with you both are informed by the governance debates currently taking place in our community. I don't know what will happen, but it seems at least probable that governance will go from, doing this much to doing this much. And we will have all these bad behaviors left behind, which we can no longer suppress with direct legal pressure. So that is a calling to all of us in this room to figure out a way to suppress these bad behaviors with social pressure. So two projects are definitely coming, which will help us with this responsibility. The first is reputation systems. This one is so obvious that it doesn't need explanation. Everyone understands right away. Reputation. I think it is so obvious that many people might not get it right. I think it'll require a lot of trial and error before we get working reputation systems. But you'll know it's working when the reputation has a life outside of EOS. When your EOS reputation becomes something that you want to show a potential employer, a potential business partner, or, oh my goodness, maybe even a potential lender. Two ideas among many with reputation systems. First, it might be interesting to try to capture all the reputation that's already out there on the internet, but that is stuck in a silo, in the silo of a freelancer website like Guru, Upwork, Fiverr, or to capture the reputation information that's out there in GitHub or on electronic marketplaces like eBay or Amazon, and to make that part of a larger reputation system. Big project. Last idea I wanted to share about reputations is not so much how to build them, but how we might use them if we do indeed feel a responsibility to create social pressure. And this is for anyone who's thinking about an airdrop. It may be an interesting idea not to airdrop on the community as a whole, but to only airdrop on people who meet a minimum threshold of reputation, and that will certainly exert a lot of pressure. I don't know if that's the right answer, but I think it's worth talking about. The last project I wanted to share is the one that I'm personally the most excited about, and it's the only one of these that Crypto Lions is working on. We want to help people tell the truth and make it easier and more accountable to make promises, so we are working on truth-telling bonds. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap with what Block 1 say they would build, performance bonds, but we think this niche of making personal guarantees is going to be richer and more nuanced than anybody realizes, and so I think there's a lot of room for overlap and slightly differentiating products. So our interface will help you carefully articulate a promise. It will let you specify what constitutes a minor violation of the promise so you don't lose your whole bond for something that's akin to a typo. We help you specify who has standing, who can make claims against your promise. The boldest thing to do would be to let anyone make a claim against your promise. You can also specify that only certain accounts can make a claim, or you can make a description. For example, anyone who's been my customer can make a claim against this promise. We also let you specify who the beneficiary will be, and if you specify that anybody can be the beneficiary, anybody who makes the claims, it kind of has the nature of a bug bounty program for making promises. Alternatively, you can specify only certain accounts are the beneficiaries, or you could specify that you'll be retiring the tokens. So the timeline for this project looks like this. We plan to have a beta in just 2 to 4 months. We plan to be the first users of Truth Bonds. We will use it to make promises to the community about our own behavior, uptime, never missing a block, keeping our blacklist updated, all the usual block producer stuff, abiding by the Constitution. Within 1 year, we will give up control of this project. To use Dan Larimer's metaphor, we want to be ship builders and not necessarily the sailors. To do that, we'll build a governance layer. If we do an airdrop, we would love to think about the idea of only airdropping on people who have a certain reputation. Of course, that's predicated on the evolution of some reputation system when the time comes. Within 2 years, our goal is to have some journalists use truth bonds in an attempt to rise above this storm of fake news and give credibility to themselves, kind of like a bug bounty program for journalists, saying there will be no factual errors in our publications and we're putting up money to guarantee it. I think that would be awesome. Within 4 years, we want to see the first politicians using truth bonds to guarantee their promises to their constituents. How awesome would that be? And for my children and grandchildren, I would like truth bonds, or this idea that you guarantee your promises with real value, to be just another institution, much the way insurance is for us. And I want it to be difficult for them to imagine what life was like before such a thing existed. So, thank you for your attention. We are very happy to be part of this community, and I look forward to getting to know the rest of you who I haven't already met. Cheers.
It's been so long since we spoke to each other. I've been asked to give you an overview of EOS governance. Governance, as I think most folks in the room know, is one of the big claims to fame to differentiate the EOS blockchain from other blockchains. This is my own brief and very subjective overview. Your mileage may vary. This is my best thinking so far, until one of you challenges me and I realize how wrong I was, and then I'll change the slides. What is governance? I believe that the word governance is best used to describe three things. A system of, number one, making collective decisions. Where shall we all go to lunch? What shall we do with inflation? Should we implement SegWit? Whatever the collective is and how that collective makes a decision. And then number two, carries the decision out. And then number three, how does the group tweak the decision-making rules for next time? So for example, that might be, let's change EOS inflation from some number to some other number. Then we have to actually carry out the decision, because having chosen is not the same thing as having done. And then, shall we amend the rules for voting on inflation? Right? Simple, it would seem. Much of what I'm going to tell you is framed in the context of what I learned reading this book, Governing the Commons. Now, Governing the Commons was written by Elinor Ostrom. She shared the 2009 Nobel Prize in Economics for her lifetime work studying how human societies actually manage their common pool resources. Now, common pool resource is anything that we share where if I take a little more, there's less for you. And if you take a little more, there's less for me. And if we both take too much, the whole thing gets hurt. Like a fishery, or the meadow that we share, or the commons, the green in our town, or RAM and bandwidth on our blockchain, things we share, yes? And so what Ostrom did was study real-world human institutions that had gone between 100 and 1,000 years of successfully managing their common pool resources, something that theoreticians will tell us is impossible. The tragedy of the commons, the prisoner's dilemma, it can't be done. We must have a single overpowering authority telling us to cooperate. Not true, not true. And in her studies, she didn't invent, she found by looking 8 principles that the successful communities had created over time to self-manage. And the first 4 are these. Number 1, to define clear group boundaries so we know who's in and who's out. You're allowed to take fish from the fishery, but that other person, they're not allowed. They're not part of our group. Without those boundaries, anybody can come in and take. Number 2, match the rules to the local conditions. My part of the blockchain might be different from your part. My enclave might be different from yours. This part of the irrigation system may be different from that part of the irrigation system. And so each part might need to have its own rules for its own unique truths. Number 3, to ensure that people affected by the rules can participate in modifying the rules, because of course that's where the knowledge is. That's the learning loop. If you can't change the rules affecting you, how can your suffering and your learning cause improvement to occur? It can't. Number 4, ensure that the rulemaking rights of this community are respected by outsiders. That this village is not overridden and harmed by the state is not harmed and overridden by the federal, and so forth. 5 through 8. Number 5, community members can monitor each other's behavior. Because if I can sneak fish out of the fishery, I'll get away with it. But if I can be seen and caught, well, I'm more likely to cooperate. Number 6 is graduated sanctions. Ostrom found that it can be very small sanctions are more than enough to control people's behavior and drive folks to cooperate. But the absence of sanctions and observation, cooperation fell apart. Number 7, a low-cost means of dispute resolution. And number 8, to build in nested tiers. One example that she gave that really stuck with me was the irrigation system, that the farmers who shared a single sluice gate all had to have meetings together to talk about their gate. And they would each send a delegate from their gate to the group that managed the feeder line that had a bunch of gates on it, because they all had a shared interest in that feeder line. And then they would send a couple of delegates up to the larger group that handled the larger aspect of the irrigation system. And that this ability to nest was tremendously important in keeping the whole healthy. So here's how we're trying to honor Ostrom's wisdom in the design of our governance. Our boundaries are token holders who have signed the Constitution. We have the ability to match rules to local conditions. All throughout the blockchain, we are built in to be able to honor that through Ricardian contracts, through dapps, and so forth. Number 3, referenda. Again, referendum software isn't launched yet, but it's coming, and it's tremendously important, as you can tell. Number 4 is the one I think most of us don't really understand, and it is perhaps the thing I would like you to pay the most attention to in this talk. If we are to be our own entity, if we are to remain independent of local courts, we must take advantage of UNCTRAL and the New York Convention of 1958, which led to over 150 nations passing each their own version of something called the Arbitration Act. And the Arbitration Act says that if you and Fred are in dispute, and the two of you agreed in your contract that you would abide by arbitration, and then you go through arbitration and you're not happy, and you come to the local court and say, I didn't like my arbitration, I want you, the local court, to get involved in the dispute. That local court will say, no, no, no. Our nation signed the 1958 New York. We have an Arbitration Act, and it says that if you agreed to arbitration, and if arbitration happened according to the rule set outlined in UNCTRAL, that binding on you, and I, the local court, will not overrule that. This is the only way I'm aware of for EOS to be able to break free of the long arm of sovereign states and to be our own nation. Without this, I don't think it's possible. Number 5, can we monitor each other's behavior? We seem to be very good at that and getting better. Blockchains are public. There have been some tremendous tools created to look at who's voting for whom, who's paying whom. If somebody stole something, where did it go? Graduated sanctions we're still working on, because that does require arbitration to work, and we don't yet have, as a community, a clear understanding of what kinds of sanctions are big enough or small enough or appropriate for different kinds of transgressions. A year from now, we will have standardized, but today it's still very early. Number 7, arbitration. There's an open market for arbitration. Most people know about ECAF as the default arbitration. What they don't realize is that every single Ricardian contract you write or sign can name any arbitration forum you like. or any individual arbitrator. You are in control of that. And if you would like to launch your very arbitration forum, I say, awesome, please do. That would be great. And then number 8, nested tiers. We have the ability to support that. We always have. It's built into the structure of the system. I know, there's a test later. There's a lot of information here. Now, we are coming into the world stage 35 days after mainnet launch in the context of other permissionless blockchains that have been in the public eye for up to 10 years. And most people are viewing this through the lens of the public permissionless blockchain world. And what is the promise of that? What are people used to? Well, there's several things. You know, censorship resistance is one and so forth, but decentralization is perhaps the one that's the biggest for me in terms of the ability to create new economic realities. And of course, decentralization does empower individuals. Of course, it does ease entry of new competitors, and it does better serve customers. But we haven't seen the kind of widespread adoption of blockchain I think a lot of us would have loved. Why? Because of the problem with public blockchain, which is also decentralization. Namely, there's nobody in charge. There's nobody in charge. Crooks can go wild, and they have. Code is the law. And in less than a decade, well, hackers have made off with, well, I think we're up to, what is it, $71 million a month as of a month. We've got the infographics being created, cute infographics showing, look how pretty theft is. And, you know, $500 million of NIM gone. And it's awful. And that's why people aren't building systems on top of that. This is perhaps my favorite example of the problem with permissionless blockchains, because when you can lose $300 million accidentally, wait, you lost $300 million accidentally. Try to explain that to your boss or your customers. Yeah, that $300 million you entrusted me with. Yeah, we lost it. And then read the subheadline. User mistakenly takes control of hundreds of wallets containing cryptocurrency Ether, destroying it in a panic while trying to give them back. You can't make this up. This isn't working. You can't build systems for daily living on top of that kind of a foundation where one bug wipes out hundreds of millions of dollars, someone's life savings. That's why the big players today in public permissionless blockchains are speculators, miners, and crooks. Speculators who play the zero-sum game. If I buy low and sell high, it's because some other idiot bought high. Or miners, they do create security, but what value do they create? Economic value. And of course, the crooks. And that's why a public permissioned blockchain alternative was thought of and has been launched, and it's called EOS. It's called the governed blockchain. And to understand a governed blockchain, you have to understand the New Chicago School model by Lawrence Lessig. You're thinking, oh, it's the New Chicago School model by Lawrence Lessig. I was reading that last night, you say, right? There's 4 forces operating. You can think of it this way. Market forces, legal, social, and code. And here's what Bitcoin looks like through that lens. There's only 2 forces. There's the code on the left, creating market forces coming from above to constrain people's behavior. But there's only a tiny bit of law enforcement way off out the edge. And there's no coherent social force. Here's Ethereum. Again, same framework. Code, market incentives, a little bit of law enforcement from off the edge, and a little bit of off-chain sort of kind of social forces. If you want to be heartbroken, look up the EIPs 867 and 999. Those are 2 different efforts to claw back the $300 million lost in the parity wallet bug, the one I mentioned. And they still haven't gone anywhere. And it's been over a year and a half. I'm not sure how long it's been. I'm sure it's much too long if it was your 300 million or even any of it was yours. How heartbreaking must that be to see it sitting there on the Ethereum blockchain taunting you, but you can't get to it because the code is the law? What if you decided to build a system where all four forces were co-equal, where all four forces were given their proper place to create a balanced whole? That might look something like this. Starting with markets, everyone has skin in the game. You got risk of sanctions, you have to stake. Legal systems have been built. There's a constitution, there's Ricardian contracts which are legally binding. There's arbitration. Socially, we're engaging in repeated interactions. We're building on identity or pseudo-identity, reputation. We engage in discussions with each other to decide what's right, which way do we want to go as a group. And then the code. Block producers can, I say can, they need to be able to, and soon they'll be able to, when sudo is rolled out, replace code, freeze accounts, and move funds in order to carry out arbitrators' instructions. But the key here is that the legislature has to do its job. The legislature are these token holders who elect the block producers and set policy. The executive branch are the block producers. They have superpowers, but they can only use those superpowers when told to do so either by the legislature or by the judicial system. And then there's a judicial branch that can only rule specific cases that are brought to them by plaintiffs who have given the arbitrator standing. And of course, they're all three are underlined by constitution and contract law. We can dive in even deeper and look at the legislature. How's that holding up? We have to have a functioning referendum system for the legislative function to work properly. It's not there yet. It must be. And we have to have some form of ballot access to control what kinds of things are gone. We can't have a spam attack of 10,000 referenda for the voters to paw through. They won't do it. We have to have voters who will fire bad block producers, and so far they have not always. And this will break down if block producers collude with corrupt whales. So there's a risk. From the executive perspective, block producers have massive power but no discretion, except in emergencies and only emergencies, and then they're expected to call in an arbitrator. They can only carry out the results of referenda and arbitrators' orders otherwise. And they have to follow the rules of reg producer. Now, by the way, many of us are upset with some of the block producers that are currently receiving either block awards or vote rewards or both, who have not abided by the text of the reg producer command. They haven't put up a website. They haven't published their disclosures. They're not in compliance with reg producer. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody has actually asked an arbitrator for a ruling on that. So you can't say that arbitration is broken or governance is broken if nobody bothers to file the dispute. Remember, arbitrators aren't walking around looking for things to rule on. You have to bring a case to them. So if you are a block producer and you have been harmed by somebody else pulling money out of the leaky bucket in violation of reg producer, which is a wrongful taking, you've had money taken from you, and you have standing to demand that that be put right. But people are going to have to step up. They're going to have to require that these rules be enforced by taking a stand. And on the judicial side, the arbitrators only rule on specific cases, and the members decide who their arbitrator is. They pick the arbitration forum in advance in their Ricardian contract. If they are assigned a particular arbitrator they feel is not neutral, they can challenge that and have that person replaced by a different arbitrator. And the arbitrator must follow the Constitution and the rules of dispute resolution. If they don't, their ruling is null and void. So this is a tightly balanced and thought-out system. I want to drill in a little bit into arbitration and ECAF because it's one of the areas that I think needs the most attention from all of us. You know that arbitrators rule in specific cases, and that ECAF, the EOS Core Arbitration Forum, is the named arbitration forum in the version 1 Constitution, which remains in force until a referendum replaces it. I mentioned earlier, ECAF uses UNCITRAL-based rules of dispute resolution, which are valid in 150 countries around the world. And the disputants are always free to leave ECAF at any time if the disputants agree to disagree somewhere else. The life cycle of a dispute, some of you have seen this drawing before. Here are some of the internal processes ECAF uses to handle incoming cases. Here's the conclusion. Governance is growing up, but it is still not grown up. We need more arbitrators in ECAF. Please do not nominate yourself as an arbitrator. There are kinds of people who think they'd make great arbitrators, and one of them is wrong. If other people think you'd be a great arbitrator, then you might be. If you're the only person who thinks you'd make a great arbitrator, I promise you, you will not be. So if you can think of somebody that you think, wow, I would not mind being judged by that person, nominate them. We need the enforcement powers of sudo. We need the referendum contract. We need to demand honest block producers, and the voter must be block producers. And we need key recovery to be implemented by Block 1. One last thing I'll mention. I said earlier that the block producer takes money from the block producer reward fund while being in violation of the letter of the Ricardian contracts that they've signed. And two of them, they sign Reg Producer when they say, please vote for me, and they sign Claim Reward every time they get money. And both of those contain Ricardian contracts that they are agreeing to follow. But we see people who are in office who certain wallets are voting for and putting them into at least vote reward, and in some cases block reward. As far as I know, no good reason, because they're not good block producers. They haven't published their disclosures. They can't be reached. They don't talk to anybody. So what can we do? And this sudo capability is really scary, because if people can prop up sock puppet block producers, what's to stop them from propping up 15 sock puppet block producers, grabbing hold of the ECAF power and overruling everything on the chain? It's tremendously frightening, or at least it should be. So I have a proposal for you. And that would be this. Not mine to say, but I offer it to you. What if we as a chain said, the moment the 7th sock puppet is voted in as a block producer, because 7's a magic number, it blocks the use of sudo by honest users. Whatever the block height is, when that 7th one is voted in, we will back the chain up 1 block, we will fork, and every wallet that voted for a sock puppet is dropped to a balance of 0. That would hold those toxic wallets to account, and it would hold off the threat of sock puppets taking over the chain, maybe. We're going to have to come up with good countermeasures. We're going to have to rehearse that. We're going to have to think it through and game it out on test nets. But I'm not aware of any other approach that can keep us safe, that we can use sudo safely in the presence of people who are voting for block producers that can't be trusted. So we've got big challenges ahead. And I think we're up for it, but we're going to need your help. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Thomas. 한국말로 Green Korean, I gotta say something. EOS가 기술적으로 굉장히 속도가 빠르고 한 것도 있지만 EOS를 다른 블록체인하고 다르게 만드는 가장 중요한 이유 중에 하나가 바로 이 협치의 레이어에 있다고 생각을 합니다. 거버넌스 레이어라고 하죠. 그래서 이 부분에 대해서 이제 토마스하고 EOS 뉴욕하고 EOS 캐나다, 그다음에 시오스, 그다음에 크립토 라이언스 이제 패널 토론이 이어질 겁니다. 토마스 컥스가 여기 계신 토마스 컥스가 50분 동안 굉장히 EOS에서 굉장히 중요한 한 축을 담당하고 있는 부분이기 때문에 토론 진행해 주시도록 하겠습니다. Yeah. So I think we could just introduce everybody. So come up.
So we've got one microphone for almost every person. Roman and I can share. Just grab my arm and say, give me the mic. He doesn't share. This is our panel conversation about the Constitution, arbitration, and the worker proposal system. What I'd like is for each of our panelists to briefly say, of these three things, which is the one that most terrifies or interests you? And then I'll couch my questions to the panel accordingly after that. We'll start with Roman. So Roman, of Constitution, arbitration, and worker proposals, what's on your mind the most strongly? And tell us why, in one sentence.
I've been most interested in worker proposal system, specifically in making a competitive process for it that kind of mirrors the competitive process that block producers went through prior to the launch of the chain.
Super, thank you, Roman. And?
I think for me, arbitration I find really interesting. How are we actually going to make decisions, and how are we going to handle when things go wrong? And I'm interested to have a conversation about that.
Arbitration. Josh?
I'd say the Constitution, just because that's the core level that will dictate how arbitration and WPS and anything else that goes on chain will function. So that's the base level that needs to be really solved and figured out.
Got it. Eve?
I think that the most interesting one is the worker proposals, just because there's so much opportunity there. It's going to be such a large fund. I think that that's where we're going to see so much of the growth, the strength is going to come from the ecosystem. And the one that scares me the most is arbitration, because there's just so much potential for misunderstanding, and we're just not there yet right now, in my opinion.
Okay, Kevin?
I would say I'm most interested, I agree with Josh, most interested in the Constitution because it's the core layer that's going to, everything else is going to build off of, but I'm most terrified about the worker proposal system because that's currently a $20 million a month fund with no direction yet. So we need to work that out.
So my thesis from earlier is that we were born perhaps a few months premature because our baby doesn't have a referendum proposal yet. We'll see what happens, and of course the Constitution's interim. So let's start off, please, with Roman and Eve. Roman, tell us, what is it about worker proposals that you would change specifically if you were in charge of worker proposals? How you say competitive, like what?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing to change yet because I think you used the perfect metaphor that we're born a little bit premature, and features that I think we were expecting are not built. Although that might make us all stronger because we have to go through these conflicts and figure it out for ourselves. That might end up being a good thing. Well, what I would do is just do exactly what Mr. Cox did with EOS Go for the block producers. Put out the announcement, try to get people involved who think they can do this, and just create the platform for them to make the case on why they would be the best managers, why they have the best design. And then I would just sit back and make sure the media happens and let token holders vote. Yeah, it's really hard to emulate the pressure of competition, manually. I think the block producers have been doing great things because they're low bureaucracy, high competition environment, and we don't want to create a low competition, high bureaucracy environment.
And certainly, I constantly wonder, what do the token holders really want, and why are they voting the way they are? I wish I understood better. Eve, what do you think?
I think what's going on right now is a lot of this, what we see in EOS, is a chain that's incredibly powerful. So even if we remove all the governance features right now, we still have something that's incredible without this. So from my point of view, I think what's important with worker proposals, with the Constitution, with arbitration, is really to tone it down, to step it back, really take our time to do this properly. Because as Josh and Kevin said, the Constitution and these other two systems are going to be the base of what we're going to see in the future. And to get it right the first time around, we really don't have the luxury to mess this up. And so I think we really need to slow down to define and to develop a as to where we want to go with this. So for worker proposals specifically, I think we need, what is the intent of this? Where's the money going to go? How would you apply? Are there any, I guess, set rules or what kind of programs or what kind of things do we want to fund with this? I think we need to take a step back and really think about that.
Like, what are the design principles
Yeah.
that we're looking for? And Josh, I know you've been very active in the worker proposal conversations. What do you think the design principles could or should or already are for worker proposals?
Yeah, I think the main thing people don't realize is there's actually been a lot of thought going into exactly what you're talking about, Eve. We spent over a month just gathering questions from the community. What do you think should go into the WPS and the architecture of it, and how it should be built to really bolster up the EOS ecosystem? And then we took those questions and we didn't just look at the way that the question was posed, but we turned the question itself around. Thomas led us through a great basically a building exercise to look at a question, if it's an open-ended question or a closed-ended question, and look at it from the opposite direction as well. And that basically allowed us to say, hey, maybe the thought is there, but the intent needs to be looked at in a different way. So we've been using that to help design it. And what are the first steps that we have to go through? Obviously, with EOS and with everything on EOS, there's just a bootstrapping issue. How do we start, and how do we get to the second iteration, the third iteration, and how do we do so in a way that the community can get behind? One of the main reasons is that realistically anyone could start up a WPS if they wanted to, and as long as the community gets behind that person, and this goes back to what Roman is saying, is that it's a competition. We have to make sure to build the best system. So it's not about this person or that person is in charge or running it. It's about making sure that we grab the community as a whole, because at the end of the day, the community is going to put in place whatever the community wants.
Yeah. Emily,
Yes.
you've been listening, I know. Any thoughts, anything you'd add, questions you've got about WPS before we shift over into other things?
No.
You're looking
good
so
on that.
thoughtful down there.
No, just
Thank you.
thinking about-
Kevin?
Yeah, I think the worker proposal system will be, I hope that we're able to look to the private sector, not just within the community, to look for leaders in the worker proposal system, because we're essentially creating a fund that is self-sustaining, whereas a normal, let's call it, if we can call it a philanthropic organization, is going to spend 10 to 30 cents on the dollar soliciting donations.
Right.
It's no longer an issue. This is pure output. So we need to find those who are able to act as a director of such a large fund, and also staff it with the appropriate people, but then taking note of the ecosystem that we're in of decentralization. We can't have a centralized group, so how do we then take token holder opinion and apply it in a decentralized manner to this staff? I think that there's a lot we can learn from the way EOS DAC is trailblazing to say we are stewards of the block producer. We are a small few, but we can be
EOS
elected.
DAC came out like a week or a few days ago, and they had already done their own internal worker proposal system, because as a DAC, as a decentralized autonomous collective, they're running a mini version of what EOS is, decentralized entity. And they've already, I think they've leapt ahead in some ways in terms of breaking ground on that for the rest of us to learn from. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more from them. So I imagine we'll come back to worker proposals before we're done, but I want to pivot, because as we're listening, I'm sure everyone in the audience has got their own opinions about how much money they personally deserve to get from worker proposals. And how they'd like to know how they'll be assessed, and how can I put in my idea. And inevitably, somebody somewhere is going to have a dispute. This proposal was not delivered correctly, they shouldn't have been paid. Or that award shouldn't have gone to that person, you counted the votes wrong. Or who knows what. The definition of conflict is two people in the same county. Humans are very good at conflict. We're almost as good at conflict resolution. And so, Emily, you picked arbitration as the thing that was most intriguing or concerning for you. I'd like you to tell us why in some detail.
It's funny that you talk about, when you say stuff like that, I just think about how many books have been written on conflict versus conflict resolution. Like which one has more? Yeah, I think arbitration's really interesting. I think we haven't quite figured it out yet. I think we're kind of in the same boat with a lot of these things. What I'd love to see on the arbitration side, if I could like take a clock and turn back time, I would have loved to see us like kind of almost like launch a test net and then have a bunch of people try a bunch of different things and see what doesn't work, and then eventually actually slowly see what works with and without arbitration. But clearly we can't really turn back time. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I really think we need to pull back a little bit and slow down and put pieces in place that need to be put in place. We're running at 1,000,000 miles a second. And even with ECAF coming in.
3,000 transactions a second is what I heard
right.
recently.
Is that the newest high today?
I think so.
But I think, I think we are really intelligent. We're really driven to go build a community that can actually govern itself.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're given the time and the ability to actually create a real thought process around it, we'll actually come out quite successful.
What suggestions would you have if someone wanted to set up a testnet like that? Have you thought about that at all?
What I keep thinking back to is like, we actually kind of had this conversation a little bit on the side over there, which is, I keep thinking back to, and I'll kind of talk about this, the testnet as part of it, which is, so if somebody comes in and says, and has a dispute, and then let's say that the response that they have isn't what they wanted from the arbitration committee. So then, therefore, they go back in for a second dispute to try to get the result that they're trying to get. Because we aren't developed, we haven't developed systems similar to, like, for instance, the U.S., right, where there's like a city government, a city judicial system, a federal judicial system, and then a Supreme Court. And so, like, what does our system look like for that? And then beyond that, when we kind of continue to talk a little bit more, like, right now, let's say it costs $20 to have something that you want arbitrated on. And then all of a sudden, if you don't get the response that you want, the price continues to go up. So what if you can't afford that?
Yeah.
And how are we dealing with people that can't afford that? So I think on the testnet, what I would have loved to see is what different types of disputes come up, one, and two, how do we deal with when community members, which this service is supposed to be available to all, isn't available at all because of financial reasons. So those are the two things I would have loved to see play out, but I don't actually feel like I have necessarily like a full stronghold on exactly what the right answer is.
When you pose the issue of how do we make justice or arbitration available to all, I noticed Josh reacted a little bit.
So I think one thing, the way I look at it is that arbitration is actually very well developed. It's just people on EOS don't quite understand it yet. That's the issue we're facing. It's not that it's not arbitration itself isn't developed, it's that ECAF as a group is not developed properly, and the understanding of arbitration isn't developed.
Do you think it's not developed properly, or do you think it's in such early stages where it clearly just hasn't had the chance to grow up and be an adult and be a full organization yet?
The ECAF you're talking about?
Yes,
oh,
ECAF
for sure.
specifically.
They need to grow up, and the hard part is everyone's looking to them to have that answer right away, and it's a group of volunteers, and it's a group of people who are giving their time and aren't receiving a lot of respect back for that time, unfortunately. But that being said, a lot of people are viewing arbitration as a means to solve every single little case, and I don't think that was ever the intent of arbitration. As Ian Grigg always says, arbitration is in place to catch everything that we can't catch right away, but people are looking at how can we catch everything right away, and it's not there yet. So I agree that it's kind of a black box and it's a little confusing, and I think the communication out of ECAF has been one of the biggest issues, because I think very few people would say, oh, we shouldn't fix an account that something clearly went wrong and it's provable to go wrong, that has gone wrong, sorry. But that being said, they're just not there yet, unfortunately.
Well, and isn't the statistic that, like, I think you said this in an interview recently, that over 95% of all eBay arbitration actually happens by bots? So
I'd heard that there's an organization called SageWise. They are, they've developed smart contract arbitration contracts for Ethereum, and they're starting to do some work with EOS now. And one of their founders was on eBay and helped build the bot that would handle 95% of their on-chain, their in eBay arbitration. which makes sense because, of course, you get enough disputes about eBay transactions. They probably all have the same rough structure, and they probably tend to have the same kinds of disputes. And after a few years, it becomes pretty clear how to automate that. We haven't had a few years, folks. We're 35 days. So it's early. I know we're all very impatient, and we think that we should throw together an entire conference in 21 days, and that's normal. And I guess for us, maybe it is. But earlier when Josh was talking, I noticed Kevin was reacting about something that Josh had said about the creation of arbitration, the maturation process.
Yeah, well, I think it has to do with ECAF, being ready or not. But it's also, when I heard that, I would agree. But it's also about the way that we've taken arbitration of how it works in the physical world and applied it in EOS. It's very important that we have a dispute resolution process because there is no state process that can work on EOS. You cannot go to your state government and lobby for some kind of ruling and then go to the block producers because they won't care because they're all from very different jurisdictions.
That's considered a strength of the design, by the way.
Right. So having something on-chain is very important. If we don't have dispute resolution on-chain, we don't have dispute resolution. But for arbitration, it's in the physical world is a very specific process, and it's specific in that you and I, or any number of parties to an agreement, have a very specific agreement. We have a prearranged agreement to arbitrate, and then a prearranged agreement under which rules we should arbitrate. And what we've created with the Constitution that we have now is an agreement that essentially, if you and I are both token holders, we are in agreement. That's very broad. So we've created this sense of litigiousness rather than dispute resolution. You and I direct parties to an agreement have a dispute rather than I'm standing over here, you're over there doing something else. I notice that it's bad, or I interpret that it's bad, and therefore that's arbitrable. And that's creating a bottleneck for the cases to ECAF. And I think we need to evaluate more specifically what constitutes an agreement between two people for something to be arbitrable rather than you and I simply being token holders. And that calls into question, where does arbitration sit? We've heard application layer, we've heard system layer. It's something that we need to work out.
And who's to say it's not multiple layers? Emily, you were reacting.
Well, I just think then it kind of comes back to the Constitution, right? Where all these things that you're talking about that actually aren't figured out in the arbitration layer actually also haven't been figured out in the Constitution layer. So once that's kind of figured out in the Constitution layer, I think then the arbitration layer will become significantly easier.
Eve?
So I echo both sentiments. I think that's the idea. So originally, Josh, you were saying, or earlier you were saying that arbitration has existed, and Thomas, you say this all the time, arbitration has existed now for such a long time. Arbitration is not the issue. So sure, some people might not understand how arbitration works, but right now I think where the bottleneck is, or where there's an issue in the community, is not how arbitration works, is where it starts on this particular chain. Where are the parameters that we're working in? And that's exactly what Kevin's saying. If we in the future get into a smart contract together, then we would appoint arbitrators. We self-appointed those arbitrators. We've entered in that in a business relationship. Whereas right now, what we're seeing on chain, we're automatically assuming that, and yeah, it is in the Constitution, so I think that's part of the issue, but we're assuming that people have entered into this contract because they're token holders, and it's accurate in the sense that it is written in the Constitution, and you've got, you signed it and everything, but it wasn't voluntary per se, and it is creating a bottleneck for ECAF, and that's what's creating the most amount of issues, I think, externally as well. So people looking from the outside looking in, the sense that we get for EOS Nation anyways, from what we're hearing from the community, people are incredibly scared about how this comes about and how this centralization of power, in a sense, is able to then make rulings, even though they might be opinions. The block producers are put in a position to either act or not act. If they don't act, then there's a perception. If they do act, there's a perception. And this right now is just it's in its infancy stage, and that's not the arbitration itself. That's where arbitration starts on the chain and where that jurisdiction lies for current arbitration. And it goes back to the Constitution. I think that's where, like you said, we need to work on that base layer from the beginning to define that. And I think we're not ready yet right now to make those calls.
In fairness, you know, we've had 10 years of Bitcoin, for about 4 years roughly of Ethereum, and no one's ever seen anything like this, but they have seen like rampant theft and phishing and hacking and all, and they're used to that. You know, oh look, $71 million stolen last month. Yeah, that's a.
Well, we're trying to apply property rights to the blockchain,
yeah,
right?
we're trying to do it, and even if it were provably better, it's still new, and new things feel weird.
Which is why we got to get it right.
Which is why we have to practice a lot and be willing to start small and do test nets and so forth. There's going to be competition, of course, for arbitration services. There's already a very hot competition for block producers. Roman, you mentioned that you're really keen on seeing competition in the worker proposals. What do you see as the similarities and differences between the way block producers are competing and the way worker proposals are going to be competing? When you think about that, you think about, okay, yeah, it's competing. The market will decide. Like we'll sprinkle magic market dust on every one of our problems, and it'll go away. But you have any thoughts yet, and maybe this is new, on the nature of that competition, similarities, differences to what we're already doing for block producers?
I think the biggest difference if we try to do a competition for the worker proposal system is that right now there is one slot for a worker proposal system. So it might be harder to get people and organizations interested in competing. For block producers, we knew that the top 50 or 60 or whatever would be making money, so it was easy to encourage all these entrepreneurs and other businesses to throw their hat in the ring and spend 3 months working full-time on trying to become a block producer. If we try to emulate that for the worker proposal system, it's harder to get that many participants because it's probably one slot that they're all competing for. Although we could talk about having side-by-side worker proposal systems. And I want to just state the counter-argument to myself, and I appreciate you letting me air my issues here. There is also a perception to get something quickly, and that perception exists too. So that's the counter-argument to me. Maybe we don't need a competition, maybe we need something fast, and then we'll improve on it later. I think that's wrong, but I wanted to give air to that counter-argument.
Josh is nodding knowingly. Josh?
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick overview of where we currently are with our understanding. If I were to paint a picture, you currently have the EOSIO.saving account that has, I think, $30 million worth of EOS sitting in it. And what we'd like to do is then create an account under that, the EOSIO.WPS, for example, that would get, let's say, 20%, the number is an arbitrary number for the moment, would get 20% of the fund above it. And then think of that as the harbor master. And then we'd basically create a ship harbor with different docks. The first one would be the emergency dock. So what needs to be done now? Security, testing, system contract upgrades that are badly needed.
Funding for ECAF.
Funding for ECAF, GitHub management repo of the repo. Things that just need to get done, that they're not nice to haves, but like things that we really need. And then from there, we can start to have competition on, you know, the second the second dock that would be built. That call it the marketing dock, and then another dock would be built. It would be the whatever, the wallet dock or whatever it would be. You would then have all these different docks, and that's where the competition would come in. So this allows us to bootstrap the process, get going right away, and then we can build the docks as we go.
I think that's a great vision. I want to propose what might be an interesting sort of point of reference for the worker proposal system. Not yet, because they've got a ton of work to do and a very difficult job to get off the ground. But a year from now, it may be useful to have a point of reference for the worker proposals, specifically compare them to all the projects that the block producers are building. If I were to make a rough estimate, block producers spend maybe roughly half of their income on being block producers and maybe roughly half on building stuff. The worker proposal fund is 8 times larger.
4 times. Four times larger.
0.5%. I'm estimating that the block producers spend half their money producing blocks and half building infrastructure.
Gotcha.
So I'm comparing that 0.5% of total inflation used by the block producers to build stuff to what the worker proposal fund will build. So, let's put that in our pockets, and after we get off the ground, let's pull out that basis for comparison. Because if it seems like block producers are doing more with 1/2 of 1% of total inflation than the worker proposal fund is doing with 4% inflation, then my fear of high competition, low bureaucracy among the block producers versus low competition, high bureaucracy in the worker proposal fund, then that fear has probably been realized, and we need to shake things up.
Well, of course. Yeah, it's okay. And of course, the block producers are spending their own money, which makes them very careful. The case might then be, let's just take part of the worker proposal fund and fund a wider swath and a longer tail of block producers and get more money into the hands of more people who have a vested interest in the success of the chain and a desire to prove themselves in the marketplace of ideas and inventions. Maybe.
Maybe. That's a year from now. Getting this thing off the ground is not a small
So a
job.
year from now is like 6 weeks, I think, for us. Is that right?
What is it in dog years?
It's EOS years.
EOS years. Emily, you were smiling when you were listening to Roman. Was there something you wanted to inject?
No, I was just kind of thinking, everyone, most of the block producers are building projects, which I think was talked about, and so the thought of these people that are so ingrained in the actual building of this system, having more resources to go build amazing things on top of it, just kind of brought a little bit of light in there.
Right. One thing that I've noticed is that, I want to have probably a couple of you comment. I'm going to watch your faces, and whoever gets most offended, I'll just call on you. We have a population who are incredibly fast-moving, impatient, impulsive, get stuff done. You have people who are block producers who have staked an enormous amount of risk on potentially getting in the money. They're throwing out codes and ideas and projects. And yet the craft of producing blocks it's actually more of a utility function that requires stability and organization and DevOps. And it's like the other end of this IT spectrum. And some of you are hiring folks like that who probably hate the rest of you. And I'm wondering when we're going to see a division between like the radical creative arm of the block producer and the get blocks made arm. Maybe you're already dividing that way internally. Kevin waved his hand as I was talking. Kevin?
I was waving at Eric, who was filming. Hey. That's already the difference of, there are already different models that you see of block producers now that are saying, we're going to give away all of our profits. We're going to burn all of our profits and do nothing besides produce blocks. Or we're going to be as creative as possible. We're non-profit, for-profit. Those are just different models. That's already happening now.
Yeah. Eve?
The comment that echoed with me is the being very impatient and being very reactionary. I think what we're seeing right now, we really need to take it to a higher level and slow I keep saying we need to slow things down because I think what we're seeing right now is everything's an emergency. Everything's the new flavor of the day, and then we react to that right away. Like we need the solution right now. I think we really need to define what our roadmap is, what is important for EOS, where we want to go, so that when there are other things that come about, we're able to stay focused and keep going in the direction that we think is really good. And I think that'll differ from block producer to block producer. But right now, because we're so new to this, and we're still in our infancy stages, like you said, 35 days. Right now, it feels like everything is reactionary and nothing is proactive. And I don't feel right now like there's one direction that people are heading. And they're starting to see some pockets of, okay, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. I think over time we're going to see more of that.
Where do we establish that? I don't think we could do a singular roadmap anywhere. I mean, every single group in this room and on stage, we all have our own roadmaps. We all have our own priorities. I think the Worker Proposal Fund is one place that could say we're going to establish a collective group of priorities. So it would be interesting if that could be part of what they do.
Well, like first thing I would say the referendum contract. That should be, in my opinion, right now, this is the largest priority. We don't have a referendum contract, and so I think the referendum contract is the premise to a lot of these things that we're talking about.
Yes.
So we might not have a full roadmap for EOS as a whole, but I think we're going to see pockets of different things that are going to stem, or that are going to stand up and going to be important in the short term. Right now, referendum contract for me is number one.
So let's imagine we have a referendum contract. I'm going to come up the road, start with Roman and work my way up towards me. I'm going to ask you, if it were up to you to pose a question to the token holders by referendum, yes or no question, a multiple choice question, phrase it any however you want to, what or choice you would push onto them, please do, choose this or fund this, what would you ask, or what would you ask for if you had a spot on the ballot that you could put anything onto, and you could put it in front of the token holders? What would you ask? And Roman, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I would assume that the first questions have to do with the constitutional debate underway, because that's the base layer for everything else.
Right. You'd go for, pick your favorite of these constitutions. 1, 2, 3, 4, however many we've got by the time we're ready to vote. Okay. And let's say that's the first one, but you've also got a slot for you. Is there something you'd like to put out there? I'll come back to you while you're thinking about that. Emily.
It's funny, I was going to say something similar to him, but
Sure.
but also potentially like a similar kind of structure for the arbitration as well. Like lay out a couple different structures and then figure out which one the community would want to vote on. But I just want to go back a little bit to that, because to what he was saying earlier, which is I agree we're in an emergency state, and we're kind of operating in an emergency state, and I almost think about it like we're literally in an emergency room.
Everything's urgent.
Yeah,
and everything's brand new.
We're in an emergency room, and we're trying to put a Band-Aid on absolutely everything. And I think that that'll get us only so far, because when you actually look at when amazing projects are made or feats of creativity happen, they're not when you're in emergent states. They're not when we're sitting here just out of our mind trying to fix every little thing that's going wrong. It's when you actually have the time and the energy and the space to have the vision. And so I just wanted to bring it kind of back to that, because I wanted to echo what you were saying a little bit.
So I'm hearing an agreement that we collectively, the people who are interested in EOS, need to somehow catch our breath
And go to a forest or something like that.
take a break.
Elections are every 2 minutes. How can we?
You have
I would
1
say
minute and 55 seconds left.
have the group that's responsible for block production handle that, and have send everybody on a retreat maybe. So Josh, what are you thinking about the referendum?
Very similar to what Roman said. I think Constitution, so I would phrase the question, do you accept the current Constitution? And then if I had to bring it back to what I think is most important then to ask on the flip side of that same question is, do you want a governed blockchain? So it could be that maybe 10% of us really want a governed blockchain, and maybe that should be its own blockchain. And it could be that 90% just want extremely fast speed, we want free transactions, and who are we to say, just because we're vocal and more engaged, that is what everyone wants? And we don't have that answer yet.
Interesting. Eve?
Not to sound repetitive, so I'll think of something else. The one thing that I think would be nice, and it would be nice to ask the community if they think there's value. There's so much good work going on in EOS right now, and we really don't have a body or something to be able to get out that message. Would we want that body? And if so, what would be the responsibility of that body? And what would they be doing, and in order to kind of spread out the good news of what's going on in EOS? Because the block producers right now are just in their own little holes and they're doing their own little things, and we're always reacting like this. I think we need somebody on the outside that can spread a message.
Somebody with a lower frequency of responsiveness, who aren't being elected every 2 minutes. And
Yeah,
so.
not every 2 minutes, 6 seconds, yeah.
Otherwise, the responsiveness is falling on the block producers.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not effective long term.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
So I think one of the first questions we need to ask are what do we want what should token holders be voting on and which block producers have discretion over. And I think we actually have an eloquent system already set up that we may not have recognized yet. We've updated the software over 10 times, and we haven't asked anybody's opinion on it. And I think that we have this dual-sided, we have a two-sided coin with smart contract, Ricardian contract. Smart contract, the code of how it functions, the mechanics, this moves what, where, when, why, and then the Ricardian contract which clarifies the intent. I think that we can set up a system where if there are any updates to the code itself and updates to the way a smart contract functions, that can be up to the discretion of the block producer until it changes the intent of the code, in which case a Ricardian needs to be updated. Then I believe it's token holder referendum. There is no one more well equipped to make judgments on whether or not the code should be updated, the smart contract should be updated, than the block producer itself until we change what it's intended to be for. So I think that's an important thing that we should discuss and start to get out there and set the expectation of this is what we want token holders to actually look at and care about. That's the first thing. What people could actually vote on, obviously it's the Constitution, but I want to come up with something unique on the stage. So I think we talk a lot about free market dispute resolution, arbitration. Right now, we have we're only just starting to set up a system which ECAF has the ability to identify themselves and their communications on chain. But we have no way to identify arbitrators, the actual people with the power to adjudicate. We have no way to identify them on chain. And then also how to onboard new forums themselves. With EMAC, for example, is one that's burgeoning in the Asian market, which I think
EMAC is the Mandarin-speaking group that is very supportive of arbitration. Any EMAC members in the audience, by the way? Give a little hand wave for EMAC members or EMAC supporters. Might see some of them in Shanghai when we go to Shanghai next.
But the two things to vote on, one is Reg Arbiter, which is something we proposed a number of weeks ago of same thing with Reg Producer, of this is sort of your code of ethics, and then obviously you would need to sign on with a specific forum like you would be like almost a sports team. But then Reg Forum, how do we actually onboard new forums that can be chosen and to ensure some kind of quality control on those forums? So those are the two new Ricardians that I would want to propose.
Interesting. Roman, about a minute ago you were starting to lift your mic like you had something you wanted to jump in on.
Yeah, you had asked earlier, besides the Constitution, what would you propose? I think I would propose questions regarding limiting the powers of the block producers, because there's a risk right now. We're supposed to have 3 branches of government, maybe 4 if you include the token holders, and we have one branch.
Well, the token holders are the legislature. So
okay, so 3 branches of government, but one is like a little bit overgrown and a little bit like more
muscular.
Yeah, more than the others, because it seems that Block 1 put a lot of thought into the block producers and maybe a little bit of less thought into the arbitration and into the referendum contract. So I would pose questions to the token holders, which superpowers do you want the block producers to use and under what conditions, and articulate that very quickly, because there's a risk of an abuse of power. And it goes both ways. There's a risk that we don't solve a problem when we can, and there's a risk that we'll overstep our powers and cause all the fears of centralization.
Right. Emily, you're nodding.
Well, I was just thinking, we have 10 female founders of EOS, and when you're even just with 10 founders trying to get something done or push forward or trying to do pretty much anything, they're all completely decentralized. They live around the world in completely different time zones. And what we personally have done is we put together steering committees. So every steering committee, anyone can be in any or all of the steering committees. You can only be in the ones that you want to be in. And then those steering committees actually come up with decisions on, or not full decisions, but basically come up with presentations on different topics that we want to make decisions on. And then it's brought to a vote by all the founders. And we found that to be really useful so far. And so it just, when listening to him talk, it just kind of made me think about well, what if we could somehow put in place something that would allow us to basically have the equivalent of steering committees?
What you've just described is essentially sociocracy or holocracy. You already knew that. And that's not an Eleanor Ostrom thing. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about holocracy and sociocracy, the book for that is Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux. It's on the reading list. You all know about the mandatory reading list, right?
How many books are on the reading list?
7 currently, I think. It's an odd number, might be 9. Josh, you were looking thoughtful.
Yeah, just to echo what they were both saying, I think actually a very important question would be, does the token holder community want us as block producers to step in and work on their behalf to remove who they deem to be a bad actor BP? Right now, we don't really have that authority by the token holders given to us in terms of, do they want us to even do this? Do they care enough to even do this? Because it's a very delicate thing to actually do.
Having some block producers pick other block producers to be ejected, it's like an invitation to a cabal. The risk seems really big, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we don't know yet, just based on the fact that certain block producers, other parts of the community say they should not be there, but just because they're a vocal and loud minority does not mean that that's what the whole token holder community wants. We should be looking to get that.
Right. How do you go from a complaint to a request to a dispute to a ruling to some form of hopefully justice, which of course is what self-governance is. If we are going to be an effective group, we have to govern ourselves, which has been humanity's big challenge for thousands of years.
I think there is somewhat of a call in the community for block producers to self-govern, to figure out their own disputes. But the most delicate part of that, and I agree with you how delicate it is, Josh, is that you're essentially, by removing a block producer, you are invalidating the opinion, the vote of certain token holders.
Well, it depends on who the you is. If block producers as a group decide to eject one of their members for reasons, for rationales that are convincing to the block producers, you know, I'd have to ask, what is the basis in law? You know, like, which constitutional power are you exercising? Whereas if an arbitrator got a dispute brought to them and the arbitrator said, this person's in violation of reg producer, and as my remedy, I require them to fix the things they're doing wrong, and until they do, they can't, they're just in violation. They're not allowed to keep making blocks until they fix it. Right? That's not block producers choosing that. That's an arbitrator weighing in on the merits of the evidence, which is what arbitrators have been given the power to do that by the Constitution. It's not an overreach at all.
Yeah, I would agree.
One hopes. Emily's smiling.
No, I'm just agreeing.
There's a strong human sense of fairness and justice and an anger when people seem to be getting away with rule breakage, but not every way to respond to that upset is equally valid or fair and equally serves the long-term interests of a fair and just and honest and wholesome society. And how we treat our rule breakers is really indicative of what kind of a society we're trying to create.
I think it's not only how do we treat our rule breakers, but it's how do we create a system where especially on the block producer side, there's such a level of transparency, aka such a level of communication about what's happening, that if something does go wrong, it's really easy to handle. And that's, I don't know, I find that really interesting.
Is it the transparency that makes it easy to handle, or is it something that the transparency helped create, like trust?
Trust and communication, I think, are key.
Does anybody notice the difference between how Bitcoin and Ethereum miners interact with each other and how EOS block producers interact with each other? Is it just me that notices a qualitative difference?
Sure, it's the competing to solve a block first versus competing to do the most good. And I mean, merchandising that good back to the token holder community. We're all competing to do the most good, and to do that, many times we must collaborate.
You can't hold more than one of the 21 seats, And so it doesn't do you a lot of good to do great in your seat and have the other ones all fumble the ball. Plus, if you are pointedly helping the other block producers, you look like an even better block producer as a result. Eve was smiling a moment ago.
I was smiling because I think that in theory that's the idea, right? You're supposed to have block producers that are producing the most amount of good for the community. What we were talking about 2 minutes ago was what about the block producers that are there producing blocks but not producing good for the community?
And in some cases are collecting vote rewards
and even more so, exactly,
in violation of the letter and the spirit of reg producer and claim reward.
So I think there's also, right now we were talking, or you were talking about what can we do on chain, or what could the block producers do effectively either through arbitration, but then the last part would be through code to be able to remove somebody. I think what we need to look at as well is what can we do off chain to get those people to become good actors. And I think that there's a lot of, there is work going on in the background to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all here off chains, more or less, right? We're here in the physical bodies, in a room, in Seoul, South Korea, listening to our translations and sharing a vision of what the future is that we want to create together. And that's tremendously powerful to what we do on chain tomorrow.
We have to figure out who they all are first.
Yes, that seems to be a challenge for some of them, for sure.
Some of the block producers are mysterious entities indeed.
But again, I think it comes back to, I might get hit for saying this, but just because we don't know who they are in 5 seconds after they came on doesn't mean they're bad actors. And just because we know who they are does not mean that they're good actors either.
Right.
And so venues like this, where we get to meet people, we get to talk to people, there's so much more that can be achieved in such a short period of time when people get together like this. And I think that this type of event is very powerful for that. And I think that this type of event, if it's done properly, we should be able to see tangible results afterwards in terms of more block producers doing more good because they get a sense of what the community is looking for. I inherently believe that, just like I think is the 3 premises of EOS that Dan had put out, that most human beings, the vast majority of human beings, inherently want to do good.
And the statistics seem to be that about 0.5% of the population is psychopathic and about 2 to 4% are sociopathic, and the rest of us are neither and would love to get along with each other, and the other ones want to hide and not be obvious that they're not doing, being good actors. So how do we proceed? Is it sufficient to assume positive intention and also to verify? What else do we need to be? What could we do better or differently at the Constitution level, in arbitration, worker proposals, or any other level? What would you suggest?
I think it'd be, in the Constitution, we try to define and delineate the powers between the different stakeholders, the token holders, the block producers, arbitration. But I don't know if we do it clearly enough. I think that just being on stage and saying, oh, well, we need to discuss what is appropriate for token holder referendum and what is appropriate to be the discretion of block producers. I don't know if that's very clear in the Constitution. That may just be my interpretation, but I think we need to more clearly define roles moving forward.
Any suggestions for how to define them, or what definition you would promote, or is that premature?
Well, starting with the first comment of intent, if intent of code changes, must be voted on by token holders. If code itself changes for whatever reason, but doesn't change the intent, then that's block producer purview. Otherwise, going back to what Roman said at the beginning, we want to create, well, at least, for whatever the high is, but low bureaucracy for as much as possible.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'd like each of you, if you would please, to just wrap up with what request you would make of token holders, or a request you would make of DApp producers, or a request you would make of other block producers, or any other member of the community. What's one thing you would ask, a call to action? What would you ask of them, and why? And I'll start with mine. I want the voters the token holders to find their voice, and either directly, or if they want to find a proxy, or they need to, you know, maybe they don't want to make their faces and voices known directly, but they're going to have to speak up, I think, and say what kind of chain they want and what they will and will not tolerate. Because I laid out earlier Ostrom's 8 principles for effective self-governance, and we're lacking on a couple, and it's a concern. I don't know that we've got an infinite amount of runway ahead of us to repair that. So that's my request is to the token holders. But Roman, do you want to take a stab at that?
I'm not going to have a request of token holders because I feel like everything's coming. Not as quickly as many of us want, but I feel like it's all coming. Like already media is getting better, token holders are getting smarter, and I think once we give the community the tools, like the referendum contract, I think we'll discover that voice is there. Maybe once I hear the voice, I'll have more to say, but for now I feel like it's all coming.
No other requests of any like block producers or dApp developers? That's fine. So Kevin.
Maybe boring, but vote. And by voting may spark the curiosity to explore. And then also it's one of the things that Eve said was let's also remember, and I know this is the governance talk, but the technology is fantastic. There are issues that we're going to work through, but that's first and foremost. So my request would be play with the technology and vote, and by both ways you're the best involved token holder you can be.
Thank you. Josh.
I think educating yourself. There's a lot of great content being put out by block producers, and if you're going to ask a question and want to change something, first see what it is that you're trying to change. Is it already in the code or not? Where do you find it in the code? It's a matter of don't just be a voice, but be an informed voice. And that's something, it's hard for us to constantly educate each individual person rather than put something out and hope that they'll all go to that same place.
And a parallel request might be for folks to create those educational tools and portals and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Super. Eve.
I echo that as well. I mean, education is really, really important. And I think what's important as well that we kind of briefly touched upon, I think we need to define or at least figure out what is Block 1's role in all of this. I still think we're not too sure what Block 1's role is. I'm not even sure Block 1 knows what Block 1's role is in all this. I think the intent originally was, here's software, community, do. And we've seen Block 1 come back and say, well, actually, community do, but only in this manner. Or community actually not too cool with what you're doing. So that, I think, it should be a focus for sure. Figure out what block roles, what we want Block 1's role to be.
And ask them to do it, yeah.
And ask them, yeah, because we're the community. So, I mean, Block 1, if really the intent was they're creating software and they're handing it over, really hand it over.
Gotcha. And final word, Emily Bush, EOS.
So I'm gonna echo Kevin, but I'm gonna kind of do it through a story. So one of our steering committees at EOS is the foundation. So one of our pledges is to bring scholarships to women to actually learn how to code. And recently we were running around and we were kind of looking at a handful of different schools that we could fund. We were looking at a handful of different ways that we could kind of form the project and start actually having scholarships, funding women with scholarships. And what we realized is that it shouldn't only be our decision, and that it should be actually a community decision, and a percentage of all of our rewards are going towards this. So what we've been kind of like planning on doing is, and we also think that this will benefit the EOS community further, is doing a EOS token, and airdropping the EOS token so that all of the EOS holders actually get an opinion on where our rewards are going towards and what scholarships are being given to different women and what schools the scholarships are going to. And one reason that I bring this up is because I think that voting is so important. I think it's important internally, and I think it's important externally. And I think that we have an opportunity right now to shape a completely new, for lack of a better word, like governmental system within this space right now. And for everybody that's holding one of these tokens and that isn't actually making a cognitive decision about what they believe in and what they don't believe in, they're just kind of sitting on the sidelines. And so I'd love to see more activity, and I'd love to see more activity, especially on the voting.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you all, Josh, Eve, Kevin, Roman, Emily, for being up here with me. I'm Thomas Cox, and that is the end of our panel. Thank you all. Take a 10-minute break, please. 10 minutes. Big hand for these folks.
Sorry, let me make a quick announcement because it's been this organization of this event is so hurried, so we couldn't show you properly how today the schedule will flow. So let me just briefly introduce.
Thank you for coming back in. This is going to be a super exciting panel. We have Richard Jung moderating, and I will let him introduce the rest of the speakers. But before I turn it over to Mr. Jung, I just wanted to make a public service announcement. There was an alert earlier today. Your cell phones might have been buzzing. That was a heat advisory. So stay in the shade, stay hydrated. No cause for concern as yet. So thank you, and with that, I will turn you over to Mr. Richard Jung. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Richard Jung with Block One. How's everybody this week? Like four parties every day, until I think it goes until Saturday, I think. So we have a half an hour. Let's just push the panel discussions. Do we have, okay, so we have a slide up. AOAM ASTC. Does that anybody know what stand for? Abbreviations of AOAM ASTC? Okay, I thought so. All opinions are mine and subject to change in the panel, okay? Thomas Cox here. Sounds familiar? No? Okay. Just an official announcement, okay, from Block One. EOS VC, any inquiry or any questions or any support you need for VC, email VC at Block One and EOS developer support. You'll get any request, any technical questions, send it over to developers at Block One, okay? And we have a request for Sydney Hackathon. We're looking for a mentor, someone who's familiar with the EOS coding, C languages. The hotels and flights are covered, okay? So please apply to eoshackathon.io mentors. I think the Australian Sydney in August, first week of August, and the London hackathon will be in October, first week of October, I think. So please pay attention to this mentor program, and we'll be happy to have you at the mentor. Okay. So we expect EOS to gain an early lead in becoming the default platform for enterprise use cases. Given that it's a general purpose platform that offers maximum flexibility to developers, we expect it to fuel additional use case and to inspire entirely new business models. Before panel discussions, I checked overall DApp rank statistics, which was measured by DAU, daily active users, and MAU, monthly active users, unique source addresses and transactions to DApp contracts, transaction volume, and was not able to find a successful usable DApp with actual traffic. I think this is majorly due to scalability issues, and market is fragmented as there's no clear market leader yet. Among all DPoS controversies, Personalized. All three of Dan's projects are the most used blockchains in the world. Well, give us a round of applause. We're getting there with community help, such as yourself today here. And it is challenging, I understand. This is a very difficult task. Nobody tried in the past before. We make it together, and we'll get there some point of time. And my sincere appreciations to the community. We have witnessed different key products and companies erupt when PC, internet, mobile era changes and the portal era, such as Yahoo and MSN, the search era, Huffington Post, now blockchains era to come. What will be the killer Dapp? I don't know. We don't know. You know, nobody knows, I think, at this point. But underlying principle to become killer Dapp is very clear. Token and user benefits. Reduction in cost of brokerages and middlemen where user and token holders gets the benefit as possible, and less to those middlemen and brokerages. Need to avoid throwing tokens into things that don't need tokens, or they're making things decentralized that don't benefit from decentralization. Killer app relates to consumer taste, simple and clear value proposition, and regulatory environment, national IT and device infrastructures, right address, market size, reliable and friendly access to customers with less channel dependence. Local market characteristics and contents demand investment from venture capital, flexibility from venture capital, and sometimes be the fast follower rather than speculating on a new opportunity. Today, we'd like to discuss the spectrum of fundamental business characteristics that Dapp can consider when defining own unique business model and what likely be the killer Dapp in the futures. These slides were created by some of the community last week in Time, and it talks about the segmentations of each Dapp, distributed exchange made of smart contract, peer-to-peer marketplace, distributed digital real estate, art market, reward loyalty programs. So, I mean, mainnet launches in June, so we're still 62% still developing. And we have number of different type of dapps. Oh, sorry. And noticeably, the China, North America is one of the big EOS dapp countries. I think the Korea is falling somewhere as etc. market. And EOS dapp cycle, 41%. We're in the process of developing the DApp here. Okay, so EOS dapp type, it's pretty colorful pictures. It's well balanced. The right-hand side is an average industry dapp type. That's not EOS dapp type. That's general dapp type statistic available on the web pages. EOS dapp type, there's like particularly 3%. The interesting thing is 1 or 2 is financial banking related major development is coming from banking and finance, but the EOS dapp type is just a 3% at this point. Interesting to see that. So now back to panel discussions. Now I have about 5 common questions, which was given to you guys earlier, and we'll start introductions from the EOSs. Okay, Orchid first. Okay, so
yes.
Introduce yourself and what's your business line? Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Orchid Kim from EOS, which is the block producer standby one for now from Korea. And we've been working very hard and we've been contributing to the ecosystem since the beginning. So in terms of dapp, we're building several dapp projects. For example, first one, Nova Wallet, which is in beta version out right now. And second is TokenX, which is a crowdfunding platform. And third one is EOS Stock. decentralized exchange in EOS. Yes, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcin Zientek. I'm with Tokenica. Tokenica is also a standby block producer based in Warsaw, Poland. And our main focus is supporting of development on EOS. So we mostly make tools for developers to have an easier job making EOS happen. But apart from that, we're also into some heavy research on identity, reputation, and next generation of social networking, which we believe is going to be probably the biggest revolution in the DApp business, especially the blockchain-related one. So yeah, this is.
My name is Nathan James. I run Scatter. If you don't know what Scatter is, it's a signature provider for interacting with dapps through web apps and now also on the desktop. We're also working on a system called Riddle, which helps provide scam and malicious intent protection inside of Scatter itself so that users can be notified before they interact with bad apps.
네, 저는 한국 IT 컴퍼니인 네오이즈 계열사에서 만든 이오스홀에서 온 권용길이라고 합니다. 저희는 원래 게임 비즈니스를 한국에서 했고요. 임직원이 한 1,000여 명 정도 되고, 이오스홀은 크립토 투자도 하고 있고, 그리고 원래는 스타트업 엑셀러레이터를 해왔었어요. 30개 정도 스타트업에 투자를 하고 4개의 엑시스를 했고, 지금은 블록 프로듀서에서 기술 중심으로 많은 기여를 하려고 하고 있습니다. 포탈, 보팅 포탈을 만든다든가, 그리고 최근에는 다른 BP들과 함께 워크 프로포젤 시스템을 만들고 있습니다.
Hello, my name is Damien from EOS, and we are a standby block producer in Korea, and we have a previous experience in financial technology in Korea, and we have a partnership. We are the partner company of Alipay in Korea. So what we want to do is that we want to achieve the payment system integrated to EOS blockchain using the EOS blockchain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's try to speak in English. Hopefully, it's okay. In Korean we say English becoming day today. 영어 되는 날이에요 오늘. So let's take it slow. Try to speak in English, okay? There are many blockchain software available out there in the market, and why you guys have chosen an EOS software blockchains? Marcin?
Yeah, for us it was a natural choice because we grew up on delegated proof of stake. Basically, we remember the times when Dan Larimer was in his pre-BitShares phase. Believe it or not, there was such a time, and when he was doing angel shares and proto shares, which I don't know if many of you know this. And so we were growing up along with this and saw it mature, and we were quite early aware of the speed that is possible there, of the scalability, and all these things that make like big business eventually gravitate towards this. And we thought that this is the only way to make things happen on a blockchain. It needs to be fast and scalable. So our place on EOS right now is very natural. Actually, we feel very at home. Even like on our team, there's like #1 Steam witness as part of Tokenica. So it's just a home ground for us.
Well, it's a no-brainer when we're looking at the users and where they will be. Then EOS is going to be the thing. I really believe that blockchain provides a lot for games. And when we talk about games, you can't have 10 second delays. You can't even have 1 second delays. Even 500 millisecond delays is pushing it. So EOS provides the closest ability that we can to give back to one of the largest communities on the internet.
예, 저희는 I'm sorry. 저희는 그 게임 컴퍼니라고 말씀드렸는데요. 그 작년에 그 블록체인에 관심을 가지게 되면서 저희가 가지고 있는 게임을 블록체인에 올리려고 노력을 했습니다. 그 이더리움에다 올리려고 했는데 여러분 아시다시피 가스비도 들고 굉장히 느려서 이더리움으로는 도저히 진행할 수 없겠다라는 생각이 들었고 그런 와중에 EOS를 알게 되었고 EOS라면 가능하겠구나라는 생각이 들어서 EOS에 관심을 가지게 되었습니다.
For me, it's like, let's say, for like 3 or 4 years, we had this concept of like decentralized platform, but it was just a concept at the moment for a long, long time. And I believe that EOS has brought the flaws that previous blockchain had that could actually achieve the concept to the real life. Zero transaction fee and high-speed transaction. I think those two were the key component needed to be implemented on blockchain in order to compete with the regular system. And I think this is the beginning of the blockchain era.
Okay, so wrapping things up, I think it's just like Damien said, TPS, we just went over the 2,800 TPS just yesterday, I guess. Yes. So that one is TPS, and second is no transaction fees for users. That's the most reason why dApp developers are choosing EOS right now. So, and then plus, there's Dan Larimer, right? Most of non-tech savvy or non-blockchain savvy users just look at the Steemit and BitShares and thinking, oh, EOS might be the one. And I think that's the reason why everyone's just coming to EOS.
Okay, thank you, Orchid. What do you believe the next generation Killer Dapp in the industry, and why do you think so? Starting from Orchid, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So as long as we don't limit the definition of decentralized application, I think we already have one because RAM market is it has been heated for a few weeks, right? So from that point of view, I think the first Killer Dapp would be the one which makes money to the users. For example, so if users can earn money from the Dapp by speculation or by providing values to the platform, it's going to be the one Killer Dapp on the EOS blockchain, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, this, because on one hand, we sometimes tend to think that a killer app has to be something so enticing and so awesome that everybody's just going at it all the time and getting excited. But I think the next generation of IT apps are actually going to be very low-key and sort of like platform agnostic. Like, for example, social networks that talk to each other and share data in sort of a machine-readable format that is no longer owned by anyone, where you can monetize your own advertising space and be the ruler of your own world, but in a very fair and also functional manner. And this is, I don't really think that we're going to see like a single, super awesome something. It's going to be like an entirely, sort of like a paradigm shift that we're going to witness. When things open up and all of a sudden you have identity, reputation, these things come together and they start sort of opening up the ecosystem so the apps are no longer siloed. Because, well, first of all, they don't have to be, but the other thing is when they're not, they're so much more powerful because all of a sudden they talk to each other. So you have like 25 concurrent Facebooks that are decentralized, but at the same time, you can have friends on each and every one of them and they all see each other. And so I think this is what actually the blockchain will allow to happen in in this sort of a platform agnostic way. So it's a complicated answer, but I don't think like looking at single apps is the right thing to do right now here.
And I very much agree. I think that when we look at the internet as it is today, the biggest apps aren't actually Facebook or Twitter or anything like this. They're more things like Google Analytics or Google AdWords, things that are across all the websites. And when we bring that to EOS, we suddenly have the ability to share APIs across multiple different applications. The voting portals are a great example of this because we have many voting portals, but they're all really hitting the same contract. And once we have APIs put in place to do things like he was talking about, or even just storing our history as humans onto the blockchain, which is something that is obviously going to happen, then many different parties can start interacting with that. And those are really going to be the killer apps.
예, 앞서 말씀하신 내용들에 대해 공감을 하고요. 추가로 이제 다른 한편으로 생각을 해보면 리버스 ICO를 하는 팀들의 주목을 하고 싶습니다. 결국에는 이제 서비스라는 게 완전히 그 백서라든가 이상 세계에서 살 수 없고 현실 세계에서 발현이 실현이 되어야 되는데 작년에 이제 백서로부터 백서만 쓰면 ICO를 300억, 400억 모을 수 있는 그런 시대에서 요즘은 투자자들도 더 많이 점검 깐깐하게 보고 돈을 모으기 위해서는 그 자기들이 잘할 수 있다라는 걸 증명할 수 있는 그런 프로젝트여야 한다고 생각합니다. 그래서 그 현업에서 과거에서 혹은 현재 트래픽을 모았다든지 기술력을 갖고 있다든지 하는 그런 그 사업을 가지고 있는 팀들, 자기들의 능력을 입증한 팀들이 우리 블록체인계에서 킬러뎁을 만들 가능성이 높지 않을까 생각을 합니다.
For my opinion for the Killer Dapp would be, I would say the system that we already have, in order to tap on that system, it has to be 2 or 3 times better than it used to be. So I would say the first Killer Dapp will be something that can only achieve in blockchain itself. So I really like the idea of digital asset, like a CryptoKitty, like digital collectible. I think those are the things that can only be achieved in blockchain itself. And in central system, we already had this huge market of like gaming items, like trading and stuff like that. And this could be so much better and easier to be trade and like sell and have a market for it in like blockchain. So I think these are the parts that's going to be really groundbreaking, in my opinion. Yeah.
So what do your opinion, what are the critical success factors to become a Killer Dapp? And what have you guys been preparing to become a Killer Dapp?
For the EOS, as I mentioned, we were trying to achieve a payment system on the EOS blockchain system. So what we are trying to do is that we have a 5,000 merchant network in Korea. And we're trying to go through those 5,000 merchant networks that saying that if you use EOS as a payment system, it's so much faster. And it's not like other cryptocurrency where it takes transaction fees or delays on transactions. It can happen rapidly, and there will be more international customers coming at you at the merchant service. So what we're trying to do as EOS is that we're trying to connect the blockchain to the real world usage so that people can actually experience what this EOS can do in like off the chain.
예, 제 생각을 보태면 지금 저희 이 자리에 계신 여러분들은 EOS 월렛도 갖고 있고 되게 잘 알고 있어요. 그런데 지금 밖에 있는 많은 인터넷 유저들은 잘 몰라요. 인터넷 유저들의 1%가 크립토 세계에 참여하고 있다고 합니다. 결국에는 그 사용자들이 이 세계에 들어올 때 넘어야 할 허들을 낮춰주기 위한 유저 익스피리언스가 먼저 해결돼야 될 것 같고요. 그리고 무엇보다 사용자에게 뭐가 됐든 가치를 줘야 된다고 생각합니다. 기존 서비스가 아니라 왜 이 서비스를 블록체인에서 써야 되는지 그런 차별성, 경쟁력이 있어야만 예, 훌륭한 킬러 앱이 될 수 있지 않을까 생각합니다.
So I don't know what makes a killer dapp. I have no idea. I feel it's kind of like speculating on a coin. Instead, I like to make really cool things. I think a lot of people appreciate some of the things that I've been doing, some of the applications that I've been putting aside next to Scatter just to show off what it can do and what we can do with EOS. And I feel that it's kind of like the movie where they talk about Facebook, the social network or whatever it's called, where you really just want to build something cool. And if people really want to use it, yes, user experience is important, but history has shown us, and we talked about this briefly between us, that if something's really cool enough, they will find a way. The computers weren't easy to use 10, 15 years ago, but you know, my mother was a network administrator. She sat there writing batch files to install Doom, and this happens. If people really want to do something, they'll find a way. User experience just makes it a lot easier to bring them into that.
What are you working on that right now? The one that hurt me?
Hurt me plenty, which is, it's funny because that's actually from Doom. That's one of the difficulty levels. I like games. And so it's, you kill somebody, you get tokens, they kill you, you lose tokens, and at the end of the match, you keep whatever you have. But you own those tokens. They're not in the game. You can immediately go to a DEX and trade them, or you could trade them for other tokens in other in-game currencies, or you could have a marketplace where you trade them for items in other games. You know, suddenly we have all of this accessibility without having to build those features into the games.
Definitely the game has a clear business model, business cases, and
I'm very bad at business models. So everybody else is going to be making quite nice coin, but I'll just be making software, and I'm okay with that.
You just kill everyone and get rich. That's basically.
I will be playing, and I'm really good. So there's that.
It's like crypto battle royale.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so we were kind of of a stance, you know, kind of go big or go home with the Killer Dapp, and so we've been researching this this identity concept, and we're trying to link it with the intention layer that we think is missing on the internet, and it's a pretty simple thing actually, but it mysteriously isn't there. That everything we do and all the apps that actually are out there, they carry some sort of an intention which can be abstracted from the app. So if I want to do something, if I want to get something done, it's actually an intention that's attached to an app originally. But if we detach it from the app and attach it to the reputation and identity, that becomes like a sort of this ghost that you can just broadcast out into the world, and it will match an intention of a person that has good enough a reputation and also has the identity, so we can technically prove that he is what he's saying he is. And we can transact with that person without an app. So that actually allows you to build any startup you can think of on a blockchain such as EOS using an abstract layer of intention. And I really wanted to talk to Block One about it because I know you guys are also working on a social network, and I think we could probably work together because we've spent 5 years researching this, and we have a lot of proper write-ups about it. And this is something that's been hunting us for decades almost. Like in IT terms, this 5 years is decades. So that's that.
Okay, I'd have to disagree with Nathan, actually, because I think what drives people to use an app is greed, actually. And people love, so people love cool stuff and cool things, and that could get their curiosity, but the human nature doesn't change, right? So what I think of Chintai project, which is a releasing platform that could bring token holders their wealth. If that goes well, then I think that's pretty much going to be a killer Dapp. And after that, social networking services like Ono, they're preparing for their service. It's pretty similar to the concept that we have on the internet. And they would have similar user experience to what we have on Facebook or Twitter. So user can, so it's opposing to your idea also. So user would have feel no difference using their Dapp, but plus they're making money. They can make money from token economy from the dapps, right? So in that point of sense, it's user experience which is similar to the ones that we already have and we already think that's cool, plus making money. That's what I said.
I don't disagree.
Okay, EOS has made a huge announcement back in Seoul meetup, multiple dApp projects. Can you please share with us what's going on with the project?
So we have, now we have 3 dApp incubating projects. One is Nova Wallet, which would have transferring a lot of various tokens, and also with a biometric sensor. It's going to come out in a iOS version first, and Chrome extension and Android next. Second one is EOS Doc, which is going to be decentralized exchange for token holders. So they would have less transaction fee, not transaction fee, the fee that they should pay for the exchange. The third one is Token Next, which is going to be crowdfunding platform. I think it's going to be similar to the worker proposal system because they would also get donations and funding from whatever they're proposing. So those are the 3 biggest platform projects that we think it's going to work in EOS. And yeah, that's the 3 projects that we're.
Thank you for sharing. Looks like the panel's got a minute and a half. This is this is the most difficult problems always whenever I'm on the panel, and as a moderator, time management is always critical, right? So maybe the last but not least, to help you better build your successful killer Dapp in the futures in the industry, what support do you need from Block One? Maybe start from Damien?
Well, that's a little tricky question because it's specifically due to the Block One. Okay. I think Block One should really commit themselves, making the Dapp first, and if they see more dapps that are useful, maybe they could, do the things that they're doing it right now, like funding them and accelerating them. I think you guys are still doing the good work right now.
Anyone?
지금 상황에서도 뭐 뎁 개발하는 건 별 문제가 없는 것 같고요. 블록원의 댄 라리머가 이런 미더에 나와서 같이 발표도 하고 붐업을 하면 더 좋지 않을까 생각합니다.
Documentation. There needs to be more documentation. There needs to be video tutorials. We need to bring this not only to developers who know exactly what they're doing, but to new developers who possibly don't. And that's about as much as we can hope for.
Yeah, well, I think we'd love to speak to Dan Larimer about social networking. That would be awesome.
I'd say education, educating developers, which Block One is already doing right now. Reach out to different communities, maybe.
I'll take a note of it and we'll share internally, okay? Thank you, guys. Time is up. 10 minutes break? Yeah, 10 minutes break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not 10-minute break. Actually, there's EOS is all about dapps. So we are introducing a couple dapps and the tools for the dapps. There's a Tokenica making new tool as a EOS factory, right? Yeah. And then there's 3 more. There's a Paytomat, actually from Ukraine in Europe, and then they're making a payment solution. And then there's Oracle Chain. Oracle Chain's got something to announce. And then we have Uncloak. So let me introduce first Paytomat, Andre. Welcome, Andre.
Hello. Sorry that you're not having this 10 minutes break. I would first like to thank you all for coming and for the organizers to do such an amazing conference, which is important because it is really different from most of the other conferences where projects go around pitching some endless token sales, and the only thing people care about is when is the next VIP party and how can I get invited. So here, I really like the people, I like the spirit here, and this is exactly the reason why I don't want to pitch you anything, I want to talk to you. And next thing I would like to say is I'm really thankful for the panel discussion which just happened because it saved me a lot of time. All the important things I want to talk about now were already introduced. I mean, mass adoption of crypto, easiness, so people need to use crypto and it should be easy for them. Then next important thing is that people should benefit from using the crypto. And all those things is exactly what is our project about. Paytomat helps people to use crypto in real life, so that by integrating in POS terminals, we achieve this moment when you can go to the shop nearby and pay with your favorite crypto there for coffee or for milk or for whatever you want, or you can go to barbershop to get some haircut or, well, anything you like. Now, when we were developing this solution, we were focusing on how easy it should be for people to use it, how easy it should be to merchants to adopt it. And we discovered that while we are believers in crypto, but we are still in this transactional period where most people in the world are not. And I wish it would be different, but merchants, they still want to get fiat payments, and they don't want to buy any additional stuff, they don't want to train their stuff, they don't want to get to know crypto, they want everything to be the same and just to have more customers. So the approach we decided to take to address this issue is that for merchants actually nothing changes. They have the same software where they normally press button pay with cash or pay with credit card, and what we do is we add one more button, pay with crypto. And then we do all the magic behind where the merchant can get fiat in the end or crypto if he likes. We personally encourage them to do that. And also merchants get bonuses from us and new clients and marketing and customers that use our wallet, they get cashbacks. So we are trying to make everyone in this whole system happy, because we know that when people are happy, they are actually using the system. And while we were working on this technology, on this product, we were looking for a blockchain which would be the most suitable for us, which would make all those transactions and conversions as fast as possible and, well, free, which is also important. And I would like to now introduce our director of product, Eugene, here. I tried to save him as much time as possible so he can talk about our technology. Probably the final thing I would like to mention is where we are at the moment. So we have roughly 200 merchants, probably more right now, that already work with us. We have 13 currencies integrated. We have a lot of people already using our system, paying in real world with crypto. Eugene, now the technology part.
Thank you so much. Like I have 5 minutes left. Straight from a horse's mouth. I don't know if I should try and get you to like me or just play an artistic developer. Anyway, yeah, we've been developing software for over 10 years, including Decentralized. And so I got to tell a few words about why EOS and what role does it play in our project. So we are friends with many cryptos. So we work directly with core teams of transactional cryptos. And we are a bridge to the real world, just like EOS told us before, but we're also a bridge between EOS and other currencies out there. So basically, we base the infrastructure on EOS, and I guess it's really hard to read, but this layered cake in the slide presents the Paytomat core, which is the balancer between dapps, wallets, and payments, which is done on EOS, and the application layer and the point-of-sale terminals with the customers and other blockchains on the top. So the choice, the hard choice of the blockchain to use is of course comes for speed and cost, because we need really effective transactions between the both the dexes, and if you are a dex that we'd like to speak to you, between normal traditional exchanges and between the wallets. It comes, of course, with the cost and speed, but also governance. And here is an immensely important thing for a payment system. So if you get your own funds frozen, that's one thing. If you get immediately or for some reason frozen the funds of all your users, that's an even higher responsibility. And that's something that we really want to tame and to bring into real world together with EOS. So we are right now in the process of migrating this to EOS, but the system is already working. So you can go to our stand, which is at the entrance of the conference later. You can choose to pay with any crypto, including EOS, and check out. So I think I still have some minutes left for this. So, and just for you to remember how this would work, you walk in a bar, you ask a waiter to pay in crypto, he brings you a QR code, you scan it, and go away happily, hopefully, right? So we are open to discuss the Paytomat infrastructure and the architecture on EOS. We would be glad for any feedback of any one of you, both technological and commercial. And just to repeat it once more, we are bridging the system to the real world in terms of real-life payments, brick-and-mortar stores, and e-commerce, because we are already developing plugins. We are bridging the EOS ecosystem to other transactional currencies which do not compete with EOS directly and which are used to check out and to make the payments. We're bridging EOS as a nation that was spoken before to local legal frameworks and to local situations, because being a transactional business, we are able to get on board local companies and local contributors who will get it done in any given country and under any given legislation. So I guess this was it, and thank you very much. I think we even saved 2 minutes of the time, if I get it right.
Wallet.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
we can make. I don't know if we have time for a live demo, but anyway, part of the infrastructure is a non-custodial wallet, and thank you very much for reminding me of this. The business development guy. So the non-custodial wallet, I think, is among the first, if not the first, to create EOS account directly on device. It's live on Android. You can go and get it from the Play Store searching for Paytomat. And it will be live on iOS. And one of the illustrations of how our system is different in its versatility is that you can create an EOS account by paying with any crypto that you currently hold in your non-custodial wallet. So I think this is pretty cool. And we're adding more features, we're adding EOS account management, and we are constantly developing. So thank you very much.
Let me, while we still have time, let me add a few things about wallet. Why our wallet is so important for our infrastructure. When you go to the shop and pay with crypto using Paytomat, you can select any wallet you like. It is really up to you. but we encourage people to use our wallet because we have this cashback program, loyalty program similar to Air Miles, where our wallet would be directly linked to Paytomat core. And when our system sees that you are using our wallet, you get cashbacks. And second, we plan to do for you instant confirmations no matter which crypto you're using. If we see our user, then yes, maybe you can elaborate on this one.
Sorry, this is like a total partnership here. So yeah, we actually do confirm your $2 or $3 espresso way before you get the confirmations of the network. So we're also trying to leverage here and to avoid the problems of long waiting, because the PTM core is able to confirm it way before, just because it doesn't make any sense to double spend on $2. So yeah, we are making it faster and hopefully making the world more connected. Yeah.
Yes. And thank you very much again. Please come to our stand. We will be happy to show you how it works in real life. And thank you very much all for coming. Thank you.
Hello again. I've already introduced myself, so I'll spare myself some time and jump right into it. I'm going to talk about development on EOS. So what are the prerequisites of a thriving blockchain? In our view, these three things are the most important. We need good core architecture, stable, cost-effective infrastructure, and low cost of software development. And we believe the first two we have already with DPoS. It's been proven to work on BitShares and Steam, so we don't really want to talk about that. But the number three is actually where it's at. So here's a brief example. How much time does it take and how much does it cost to build an app on iOS or Android? It's actually pretty expensive, like to get it from start to finish. 8 to 12 weeks, $50,000 to $80,000, depending on the complexity, on the part of the world that you're in. Like in blockchains, these things can really be expensive, like quadruple, like it says here, because of the lack of tools, developers, and all that. So we took cues from the best and figured out how Google did that with Android. How did they hack iOS and just basically took their market share? They trained developers big time. They threw millions of dollars into training of developers. And these are just 3 snippets of some articles that we found online, and from 3 different dates. One is like from 3 years back, and one is like this year, I think. So what we think needs to happen here on EOS is the same thing. We need to train an army of developers. And this is my pledge, and also this kind of a call to action to all the BPs and everyone involved, that we need this sort of a developer support alliance. Apart from what Block One is doing, I think we need to step it up also and do the same. So we need developer trainings, workshops, and build some tools and IDEs and coding infrastructure to really speed it up. So then we can talk about the politics and about the arbitration, all the things that we will actually have something to arbitrate, because right now there's nothing really to arbitrate. These are the Tokenica's contributions to the cause. The first thing we built is we started it like 7 months ago when EOS was in its infancy stage. It was a very wonky code base, but we started coding at the time. And it's a smart contract testing platform, which is already compatible with 3 major operating systems. It's using Python for scripting, unit testing, and like we all know that this is very important, like testing your smart contracts properly. It can save you a lot of money. We know we can reverse some things, but we wouldn't want to do that on a blockchain. We better do it in a smart way. The next thing we decided to do is we set up a proxy voter called Tokenica for Dev, which is going to support all the BPs that share this vision, that support of EOS development is extremely important. So these are the rough guidelines. So everybody who's helping with the development of useful tools on EOS, training developers online or offline, doesn't matter, or just building sensible apps, you can count on our votes from this, and we'll be screening this in a non-violent way. We're not going to be judgmental or exercise some power because of it. It's just like a common sense move. And the last thing, we'd like to invite everyone interested to our developer conference in Warsaw. It's going to be around mid-October. Still, the date is tentative, but we think 13-14 is most likely. And this is what we're going to talk about: cost-effective development on EOS, all the pitfalls in smart contracts, review all the available tools, and do all the competitions and everything that makes a conference exciting. So, well, I still have a minute. I thought I wouldn't make it. Anyway, I won't take much more of your time. This was everything. If you think that this is relevant, basically, these are the two ways you can support us. And this is not a pitch of our thing in any case. It's just knowing that without proper development, we won't get anywhere on EOS. So thank you very much, and take care.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm John Tan from Org Chain. Yeah, I'm the co-founder of the Org Chain, and I want to share something about us as a BP candidate. Okay. Yeah, we said our team is technical-oriented, and we focus on DApp ecosystem and make some open source action. Here is some figures. Yeah, we have 46 blockchain patents application in China, and we have take part in 3 blockchain standards, and we have 3 heavyweight dapps, and most importantly, we have 21 GitHub repository in our EOS ecosystem. So I will give you some details. Yeah, this is our team. Why we say we are technical-oriented teams? Because up to now, we have submit a total of 46 blockchain patents in China, and we have participated in the development of China's national blockchain technology standard, including blockchain reference architecture, blockchain data format specification, and trusted blockchain. The first 2 standards have some relationship with ISO, and the third one has relationship with ITU. So this standard is not just Chinese blockchain technical standard, but it will be some part of the international blockchain standard in the near future. Okay, this is our main product, Org Chain, PocketEOS, and EOS Dev Helper. The first one is Org Chain. Org Chain is the name of our team, but it's also maybe the first project released in the EOS ecosystem. Yeah, it's a special platform type DApp made to solve data service problem on EOS. And at present, the Org Chain smart contract is issued in the mainland and is about to provide the random number and other worker service in the EOS platform. Now here is PocketEOS. It's maybe the first open source EOS wallet and DApp platform. The beta version was released this February, and currently it's run on the EOS main network and has supported third-party DApp application. Now here is our killer Dapp named Prize Quiz. Yeah, it's a game about the FIFA World Cup, and for about 70% of our users of PocketEOS will play this game. Here is EOS Dev Helper. It may be the first open source cross-platform PC-sized EOS wallet tool. It can be used for smart contract testing and debugging, showing the interaction details of each steps of the execution of the contract. Okay, I have introduced 3 products: Org Chain, PocketEOS, and EOS Dev Helper. It's open sourced, but we have open sourced a lot of other things besides this. This is our GitHub. We have 21 repositories on our GitHub. 9 is tools, 3 is digital wallet, and 9 is smart contract. Here is more details. Yeah, there is 9 tools, including contract development tools, debugging tools, or some signature core. Okay. And there is 3 digital wallet repository, including our PocketEOS on Android platform, iOS platform, and totally black box mode PocketEOS with open source on our GitHub. Here is a smart contract, our own Oracle market contract, and other smart contract, just like random number contract. Yeah. All of above items can be downloaded in our GitHub. Yeah, and we have adopted the most friendly source agreement, LGPL3. So everyone can download the code from the GitHub and do the further development. Yeah, we also hold the Global US Developer Conference in Beijing this July. Okay, this is the figure. Yeah. So if you like us, you can vote for us. Okay, thank you. We are OrgChain.
Hello, how are you? Is everyone okay? Yeah? All right. Okay, I've got 4 minutes and 56 seconds and counting. My name's Tayo Dada. I am the CEO and founder of Uncloak. We are a cybersecurity company based on EOS. I'm extremely excited to be here today. I've been to far too many after parties and I'm starting to feel the weight of it happening. Let me see if I can press this button. Okay, does anyone know what this is? This is a Commodore 64. Does anyone know what a Commodore 64 is? One guy over here, wonderful. 4 guys. If anyone who knows what a Commodore 64, you're obviously going through a midlife crisis right now. Okay, so Commodore 64, I used to program games for Commodore 64 when I was 9 years of age. And at the age of 16, I begun to hack and break into a couple of systems because I couldn't get a girlfriend. And from that time onwards, I started to work for KPMG because I broke into KPMG, and then I had to work for KPMG or they would take me to the police. And so by working with KPMG, I broke into Citibank in the UK, also broke into Lloyds of London and Milford Insurance on behalf of KPMG, setting up the UK's first ethical hacking department. And ethical hacking basically means you get paid legally by a company to break into their system. And so that's what I was doing. So the reason why I've created Uncloak, and Uncloak means to unveil or to take off. And one of the things that we want to do is that the world's largest infrastructure problem is cybersecurity and threats and data breaches. We have to understand now that on a daily basis, for example, there are over 25,000 attacks that are reported every single hour. Last year alone, in 2017, there was 4.1 billion attacks and breaches that were actually reported. These are ones that are reported, and I can guarantee that this is probably 100, 1 to 100 ratio in terms of ones that were actually reported and compared to what's actually happening. So one thing I found out is every single time that we worked with a client, and I run a cybersecurity firm in the UK, I work with a local government and also national government providing cybersecurity. One thing I found, every single time that we went to a client to perform a cybersecurity check for them, by the time that we produced a report, the very next day, a new threat would come out. And this was getting a bit silly. So one thing I thought, why don't we create a system that continually protects your network? And so we started to look around and say, okay, right, what can we do and how can we build this and how can we go about building this? And so we've been building a threat detection system, which I'll go into a little bit more detail with 2 minutes and 26 seconds left. So what our system basically does, it does 3 things. The very first thing it does is that it's able to tell you what weaknesses you have. So if you're running a Windows machine or Solaris, Linux, Notepad, anything with an IP address attached to it, we're able to tell you what threats and what vulnerabilities exist right now. Now, the difference between a threat and a vulnerability is this. A vulnerability is a weakness. So a weakness is like having a hole in your roof. If you have a hole in the roof, the rain can come in and that can damage your furniture. A threat, however, is when you have rain. Rain isn't dangerous unless it gets to the hole in your roof. And so what our system does, not only do we tell you what issues you have today with your computer systems, we also tell you by using some clever artificial intelligence, by monitoring information in the dark web and also on the public internet, we can actually monitor information about some of the latest threats that are coming through, and we relay this information back to clients. One of the things, the way that we use EOS and the blockchain is that we believe the best way to deal with the world's largest infrastructure problem, which is hacking, is to use the strength of the community. Now, we all know that EOS is has the best community around. But in regards to resolve this issue, we have to understand for every legitimate white hacker, in other words, a white hat is someone who is allowed to break into systems on behalf of a company, there are at least 10 black hats. So these are 10 people on the outside that are trying to break in systems illegally. So the best way that we can tackle this problem is by working with people on the outside that aren't necessarily qualified but know what they're talking about when it comes to computer security, and bring them all together using the power of the blockchain. So as I mentioned before, we obviously go out onto the public internet and also the dark web looking for new threats and vulnerabilities, and this is completely revolutionary. And the whole idea of this solution is not just to work with enterprises. The aim of this solution in Uncloak is to work with companies regardless of their size. So for example, 96% of companies around the world are less than 25 members of staff. And it's very important that we provide services because you are only as strong as your weakest link. Smaller businesses are interfacing and working with larger businesses. And so if a small business has a security issue, it's going to cause issues up to that large business. And so we want to work with cybersecurity throughout businesses regardless of their size. Some of the ways that we use EOS is permissioned access. So for example, after we've performed the scan with a client, we'll basically place a very small amount of information after we've stripped away information like IP address and anything that is associated with that customer. We are then able to put the software version within the blockchain. And then we have a group of ethical hackers, and we also work with Adecco, so we're partnered with Adecco. So if we don't have enough hackers internally, we can go to Adecco, who are able to provide us with a set of ethical hackers. And then what we do with that information, we're able to look for some new vulnerabilities and push all this information back to the client. Okay, we're already working with Adecco. I've got someone on the right looking at me. Okay, so I'm about to finish off. So we have a full ecosystem, vulnerability scan, and we have a threat bounty, so we work with a whole community. And the best way to tackle this solution is by working with the community out there and making sure that we can help companies to be a lot more secure. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tayo, for that great presentation. Just, so it's lunchtime. Hope you guys are hungry. A simple announcement. The main lunch, which is a bento box, will be served here in this hall. If you have any special requirements, namely vegetarian food or gluten-free food, in that scenario, you would want to go out of this hall and go to your right. That's the Chagall room where you'll be able to have your vegetarian option or gluten-free option. The rest of you can sit here and lunch will be served here. Lunch is until 13:30. That is 1:30. We're going to start the next session. The next session is the lightning BP round. So you're going to meet some BPs from across the world. Have your lunch. You can hold on to the trash on the table. It'll be cleared. You can take a bio break outside before 13:30, please. There's coffee in the aisle outside. You're welcome to have that. So in just a moment, lunch will be served. Thank you.